solid. I am live. And we go higher, it's a light. This is the way. Just gotta press watch it, huh? Me channel. There we go. Ah, dear. So many little things to do. This is the way, this is the night. Can't be a bit of coffee in the morning. It's all about getting the right ratios, I say. Good morning. E, B, C, D, E, F, G. My name's Frank. My name's Frank. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. This is the way. This is the life. That's the life. Oops. Just go around the block. Okay. Go around the block here. Uh. Anyone know where we're going? I'll mod you if you know. Where's that? What's over here? Volknos.
We have to sit with Hamas and say, look, is this really what you want? Is this your intention?
They wrote it down in their charter.
But there's so many things written by Israel. There's so many written by so many people, but they don't.
Now you're doing what about it?
But then look, international law has to apply to Israel as well. You have to understand, Israel has been demolishing and completely destroying.
That would be chapter 2 of any peace negotiations. But chapter 1 is, for the purpose of this conversation, how does an expressed desire to drive Israel into the sea set the groundwork and the foundations for fruitful peace negotiations?
I really don't think that's what the intention is. I'm sure they don't want to demolish the whole of Israel,
okay.
Right? James.
So why do they have a charter?
Yeah, that's probably been there for time. They probably haven't even bothered changing. But my point is, look.
Why do they have it? Why do they have it?
There's been negotiation. The Oslo Agreement was there, first of all, remember. Right? The thing is, look, we have to, even in the Oslo Agreement...
I appreciate you weren't expecting the conversation to go in this way, but you can't continue to endorse the notion of peace negotiations with the information that everybody has just heard me share with you.
No, but what I'm saying, James, that even if Hamas say, for example, that, look, all we want to do is get our borders clear. But
they don't say, do they?
But they do. But
they say we want to drive Israel into the sea. And would it be with Hamas that you envision Israel negotiating?
They have to understand the plight of the Palestinians for 70 odd years. You can't just say, oh, because one sentence.
You're jumping around a lot, aren't you?
So no, you cannot.
Because we've talked a lot about the experiences of Palestinian people. We talked a lot about Gaza being described, I think, by the United Nations, by one of the former heads of the United Nations, as the largest open prison in the world. No one's disputing the barbarism, really, of cutting off electricity, fuel and food to 2 million people as a punishment, in a sense, for the sins of a relatively small number. But I think the point you miss, and I'm grateful to you for trying to simplify things for the rest of us, I think the point you miss is Hamas don't want peace.
Of course they do. They want.
Which brings us to the bit in the Charter that you just think they don't really mean. And that's the point at which this conversation becomes a bit pointless.
No, James, the thing is, look, that's one sentence. The action speaks louder than words.
It's quite a big sentence, mate. Actions do speak louder than words, and we're talking about the actions of the last 48 hours.
If I come to you over the
from an organisation that you're now on the radio claiming wants peace.
James, if I come to you continuously, harass you, shoot your 2-year-old child, take away 90% of your house, and dictate to you how you can live your life in every aspect of your life, and you lash out and you throw a punch, right? Do you expect me to sit there and take it all continuously?
You're comparing the murder of 700 people to a punch.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that
everyone just heard you.
I'm giving you. Come on, James. I'm not that daft, right? Every single life is sacred.
Literally just said it.
Every single life is sacred. I'm saying that you gotta expect some reaction. If you're gonna keep on harassing people continuously on a daily basis.
So what you're doing is the thing that we said at 10 o'clock this morning that we weren't really going to allow today. Is you're arguing that it's not inexcusable, it's not indefensible, and it's not unjustifiable. You're offering up excuses, defences, and justification.
I'm not justifying any loss of life. Every single life.
Because you just compared it to throwing a punch.
What I'm saying to you that there will be people who will not sit there and take it continuously. Yes. I mean, if you're going to keep on, there's been so many incidences, uncountable amount of incidents on a daily basis where the Palestinians are being harassed and oppressed. Right, this oppression has to stop. The 28 UN resolutions have been broken by the Israelis. Nobody says anything about that.
They're often talked about, but just not in the 48 hours immediately after a terrorist massacre. Because that sounds like excusing, and that's what you sound like now.
That is not an excuse.
I'm glad that it's not your intention, but they're very odd points to make in the context of the murders that we're discussing.
What I'm saying, after this, we want peace. So how do we attain that peace? My point is, how do we attain peace?
Well, my point is, you don't attain peace by negotiating with an enemy that wants to drive you into the sea. I don't know quite. I mean, listen, I'm not rude. Crikey, there goes the truth alarm. No, I'm really not rude. So the point at which I point out to you what it says in the Charter is really the point at which this conversation on an intellectual basis ended, isn't it? Because you're now reduced to claiming that you know that Hamas don't really mean it. Which is we'll both agree ridiculous.
What they've written in the Charter, I mean, what Hamas has written, that is what they've written. There's so many things that UK government...
You're doing it again. I mean, and it's not your fault, you didn't write it, but it's the point at which this conversation becomes pointless, because you're now telling me that what Hamas have written in their Charter, their very raison d'etre, the essence of their existence, you're here to tell me from Leicester that they don't really mean it.
Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas leader, what did he say?
Just absorb the words I've just said.
Have you listened to Hamas? That's the point, James. Have you listened to what they're saying, what they want?
Well, how can I know? I presume they don't mean that either.
They have said that...
So you're choosing the bits that they mean and the bits that they don't mean. From what position of authority do you do that, Abdul?
Listen, James, my point is, you have to listen to what they are saying. Don't just listen to don't just read a piece of paper and then... You have to listen to what they're saying. Listen to his interviews. What he said. What they want.
I shall.
They want.
And I shall look forward to him being asked about the expressed desire to drive Israel into the sea. And if he says, "Oh, we don't really mean it," then I guess you'd have a point.
You have to listen to what he says. Don't just read what. Don't just.
Don't just read what they say. You have to listen to it as well. Okay, I shall do my best.
You have to listen to what
I shall do my best to broaden the horizon by both listening as well as reading what is said in the context of it. I will. Thank you, Abdullah. It's coming up to 11:30. peace negotiations are arguably the only way out of this, but the question then becomes who you negotiate with. And the idea that the people responsible for the events that we saw this weekend are minded to sit around a table and have a peaceful chat seems to me to be highly unlikely, not least because of the contents of the charter. But, you know, it would be nice to believe that there were an alternative route out of this horror show. Abdullah, take care. It's 11:30. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
Israel's defence minister has ordered a complete siege on Gaza in response to the weekend's Hamas attacks. Rishi Sunak will hold a Cobra meeting later. He says the UK is in close dialogue with Israel. A 77-year-old man is still missing after heavy rain swept across Scotland. Rescuers have resumed a search in the River Tay in Perthshire, where the man was last seen. Network Rail has agreed almost £1 million in damages, with 7 people affected by the Stonehaven rail crash. 2 people, including the train's driver, died in the derailment in Aberdeenshire in August 2020. LBC weather: warm and sunny for most parts of the country. Patchy rain in Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and northern England. A high of 24 degrees.
This is LBC.
The great thing about buying a new car from Evans Halshaw is doing so in-store, in person.
But another great thing is simply browsing and buying online.
Sometimes you want to have that conversation face-to-face.
Sometimes you just want an easy-to-use website.
So if you do want to talk about buying a new car, go to your local Evans Halshaw. And they're open till 6 this evening.
Or go to evanshalshaw.com and search thousands of cars right now.
Evans Halshaw, where buying your car revolves around you.
At Tesco Mobile, we're a little bit and a little bit. We call it Supermarket Mobile. It means you can collect Tesco Club Card points with every phone bill to put towards your weekly shop. Holy guacamole, that's helpful. This is Super Helpful Mobile. This is Supermarket Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps. Tesco Club Card holders only. Collect 1 Club Card point for every £1 spent. See tescomobile.com/y-tesco-mobile.
At E.ON Next, we believe life's better when you know you can choose a fixed energy tariff where you'll be safe in the knowledge of what energy price you're paying for the duration of your contract. We think that makes energy a little bit better. And that's why we're always working towards helping you get more out of your energy. So visit eonnext.com today. T's and C's apply. Smart meter required if eligible. Exit fees apply.
Come on, guys, it's time!
To celebrate the cinema release of Trolls Band Together, Zing Flowers has an all-new range of colourful bouquets and plants inspired by your favourite trolls. And some exciting new characters.
What?
Will you send Branch's Bust a Move? Or maybe Poppy's Positively Pink?
I love it!
Order yours today at zingflowers.com and see Trolls Band Together in cinemas October 20th. Zing Flowers. Amazing every time.
Hiya.
Hi.
Did you know you can unlock instant savings on your shopping with new BP Me Rewards Price?
Ooh.
Give your BP Me Rewards card a scan.
Well, that calls for celebration!
Wowzers.
Celebrate instant savings at your local BP M&S food store with new BP Me Rewards Price. Scan, save, ka-ching. 16 plus participating stores. T's and C's and exclusions applied. See bpmerewards.co.uk/price for details.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC with James O'Brien.
It is 11:33. Labour conference underway, of course, being somewhat overshadowed both internationally and I think nationally at the moment by the unfolding situation in Israel-Palestine, where the reason I mentioned semantics earlier is because if it is a war, then there comes a point where you struggle philosophically and ethically to call one side soldiers and one side terrorists. But as it stands at the moment, the atrocities inflicted by Hamas on Israeli civilians over the weekend were clearly and definitively acts of terrorism. But it does become philosophically nuanced when, you know, the collective punishment, I think, is still a war crime under the Geneva Convention. But I guess the definition of punishment then becomes somewhat negotiable, and besieging the whole of Gaza, which is how the Israeli Defense Minister has described it, cutting off energy, food and other supplies, electricity, is... what's that? Well, actually, we could do that. My phones are all full at the moment, but just in the interests of understanding, what does that achieve? What does that achieve? What does cutting off all... What's the end game? What's the hope? That they will just hand over the Hamas terrorists, or that the Hamas terrorists will just put their guns down and walk into Israeli arms? I genuinely don't know. It's a genuine question, actually. I've seen the coverage of the story, widespread coverage of the description, but I don't understand what the justification would be. Well, rather what the intention would be. And I'm possibly being really stupid, and I'll take one phone call and it'll last 2 minutes, and you'll tell me what the thinking is on the siege now of the whole of Gaza, and I'll feel very stupid for asking the question in the first place. But the other element of that is that if Israel blockades Gaza, that's a better word perhaps than siege, then I don't know historically, and I've made no bones about my lack of deep understanding that's something that Egypt could easily undermine, isn't it? Both geographically and presumably logistically. But this complete siege, that's the word that Israel's defense minister has deployed, saying authorities will cut electricity and block the entry of food and fuel. What does that achieve? 11:36 is the time. Millard is in Chiswick. Millard, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. First time caller.
Blimey, you pick your moment.
I know, right? I mean, and I just really I love listening to contributions of others. I'm just here in the capacity of someone who's kind of studied the region and studied Israel and Palestine for the better part of a decade. And I just think a lot of your callers are coming in with, I guess, the stereotypical response, which is like angry triggered Muslim or angry triggered Jewish person who rings up a talk show and doesn't know quite exactly how to get their emotions across. So
try not to patronise them, Millard.
I'm not trying to patronise. I think the last 48 hours have been terrible. I think you can say that the acts of Hamas are deplorable, and then you can also say that the acts of Netanyahu over the last year or so is equally just as deplorable, because
a lot of the callers that you've just insulted have said that.
But what's happening is, I think a lot of people will say that, and then they'll go back to the conversation about international law over the last 30 years, or they'll talk about something to do with international law ideology, and then they'll take it to somewhere where you, as the kind of mediator, will question, there seems to be a lot of aggression coming towards your point, and so this doesn't get the Israelis and the Palestinians any closer. So the only point, if there's one point I'm trying to make, it is that when you're talking about the Charter of Violence, or the Charter of Hamas's Charter, Hamas are not the representatives of the Palestinian people. They were democratically elected at some point within this modern history of the Palestinian people. But what's happened is the Palestinian people, every single time they had a representative who was attempting to do anything, get any further, be it within any of the accords, the international community did not put enough pressure on the Israelis over the last 5 decades. So the question now is, what is Hamas? Hamas is no more than a proxy. It's no more than a proxy. It's no more than an outpost, right, for Iran, for Hezbollah, for a group of countries who have put themselves geopolitically in staunch opposition to not only the Israeli state, but what is in more modern times referred to as the Arab Zionist groups of Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Gulf. So I think it's really important and maybe quite sobering to the people who are hearing this, including maybe the people that I might have patronized, who are very devout Muslims, sitting, listening, thinking.
Listen, I'm going to patronize you a bit now.
Tell me, go for it.
Just try and make a cogent point in a couple of sentences if you can, because all I've heard so far is a sort of word soup.
Okay, so what's going on right now is we're going to have, it's falling apart in the Western world. The relationship between Muslims and Jews it gets worse and worse every time something like this happens. I want for people to understand, right, that Muslims and Jews are firstly brethren tribes. Secondly, in the world of geopolitics,
I don't know if we are pinning this down into easily comprehensible sentences.
It has to be.
Because I've got a guest waiting on the other line. So
I understand.
When you thought, what is the central point that you wanted to make, if you can?
The central point I want to make is that people like Netanyahu, Trump, Mohammed bin Salman, leaders, right, in the modern world, have been willing for this day to come. Because every time they miss an opportunity to create peace, they're only going to lead to the eventuality of war.
I think that's a really good point. I think that's a really
point I wanted to make.
And I'm glad you did. I think that I don't want to call it lazy, but I'd call it a naive presumption that all leaders actually want peace. Whether you're talking about the leaders of Hamas or the so-called leaders of the free world is a little bit, let's just say, overly optimistic. Thank you, Minal. 20 to 12 is the time. Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, is at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool and joins us now. Before we talk about the conference, we will inevitably talk about events in Israel over the course of the weekend, and also the rather unsightly, unseemly, unacceptable sights of people celebrating these terror attacks on the streets of London. Sadiq Khan.
Yeah, good morning, James. So I spent this morning at a synagogue in Liverpool, the Prince's Road synagogue, where you've got some pretty scared, frightened Jewish people. Many Jewish Londoners were with me at the synagogue, and I spent a lot of time this morning in contact with our police service in London. Firstly, I just want to, first chance I've had to speak to you since the events over the weekend, to condemn the actions of Hamas in Israel. But also to explain to those of your listeners that aren't Jewish the trauma and fear felt by Jewish people in London and indeed across the country. And you know, the ripples of fear are felt because they know that when there are disturbances in the Middle East, it often leads to an increase in hate crime, anti-Semitic crime in London and across our country. And the reason why last night's windows being smashed in this restaurant I've been to many times, Peter Restaurant, in Golders Green, and the graffiti is so serious is because the Jewish community have in their memory the events of the 1930s, with Jewish properties having their windows smashed, a community that was a minority feeling as if others are against them, incitement towards hatred. And that's why it's incredibly important for me to say to your Jewish listeners, the police over the last 48 hours, that there's been an increased presence in our communities to make sure Jewish Londoners feel safe. As it is, if your place of worship is a synagogue or your school of choice is a Jewish faith school, there's increased, enhanced security. It's upsetting for me to say that. That's the reality of being a Jewish person. That's been enhanced over the last couple of days. But I want to be quite unequivocal about this. There is no place for hatred, anti-Semitism, incitement in London. The full force of the police will come down on you if you try and do those things.
And yet, of course, there will also be, and in a way I'm sort of ambushing you with a conversation that's already an hour and a half old, but there will also be a lot of trauma and fear among the 2 million people who've just discovered that they're having their electricity, food and fuel cut off.
Well, let me just say,
Gaza.
and it's really important I make this point. Look, it's possible to be pro-Palestinian and pro-Palestine and condemn Hamas, condemn what Hamas have done in Israel. There's something inconsistent with being critical of Prime Minister Netanyahu and saying that what Hamas done is unacceptable, and also to show solidarity with our neighbours in London and, by the way, Manchester and Liverpool and other parts of the country, the globe, where we know Jewish people are going to face anti-Semitism. And I think, actually, you know, it's the oldest form of hatred known to man, some would say, anti-Semitism. And, you know, it was a source of pride to me that I was invited in advance of this weekend, weeks ago, to go to an event at a synagogue here in Liverpool. And those of us who aren't Jewish are going to understand why our Jewish neighbours, friends, colleagues are feeling scared.
Why did Susan Hall say that Jews were scared of you?
Oh, look, it's for her to explain why she said what she did. But my concern about what she said and the way she said it is we're seeing a repeat of 2016 in relation to the tactics used by the Conservative Party, who are the only party, by the way, who can win the mayoralty, except for me. It's a two-horse race, particularly with the government changing the voting system to first past the post and photo ID. And what I'd say to her, the Conservative Party, in a polite, courteous way, is, for goodness sake, don't weaponise the Jewish community to win votes. Stop it.
Were you surprised to hear Rishi Sunak give her a vote of confidence just a few days after she'd accused you of frightening Jewish people in North London?
Well, we saw last week not just the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, proudly supporting the Conservative candidate, as they did in 2016. But, you know, it's not, if it's going to be a repeat of that campaign, I'm hoping it's a repeat of the ending of that campaign, which is us in London showing that, you know, hope overcomes fear and unity overcomes division.
I don't know how many conferences you've attended as a Labour politician, but as you look back over all of them, where does this one rank in importance?
So I'm showing my age now to those of you listeners who think I'm 25. My first one was 1994.
Right.
And this is pretty special because obviously for a long time we've been in opposition. There's no complacency in this conference at all. The metaphor I use when I've done a number of events, you'd imagine, the metaphor I've used is, you know, look, we're top of the table, but the season has a long way to go. And you speak to any good football captain or football manager, the most important game is the next game. Our next game is Rachel Reeves' speech in a little while, Keir Starmer's speech tomorrow, and we've got a number of games before the general election. What Keir, Rachel and the team have done is show the difference between a Labour Party and a Conservative Party. Just in the last couple of days in Liverpool versus Manchester, we're united. We are telling the truths. We're setting our positive vision compared to a Conservative Party last week, divided, telling lies, and running away from their record.
You've seen the word clouds surrounding Keir Starmer, which focus really upon the absence of much substance. Do you expect that to be fixed by the end of the week, by the end of conference?
Well, look, I think what we're going to do is understand the trajectory in relation to when the election is going to be and the cycle. So the two-thirds of the mission is done, changing our party for the better. And I make this point, had this conference taken place a few years ago, in the aftermath of what Hamas did in Israel, there'd be a very different Labour Party conference taking place. So he's changed our party for the better. Secondly, he's been an effective opposition to the government, calling out where the government's got it wrong. I think he's on his third Prime Minister. The third part of the mission is setting out our positive mission for the country. And you've seen in the last couple of days from, West Street and setting out how we're going to deal with the backlog in the NHS. Angela Rayner is setting out how we're going to build more genuinely affordable homes, make developers do more towards fixing some of the challenges we have. Rachel Reeves setting out how we're going to make sure we make planning easier for those parts of development, small businesses, to the investment in the green economy. And Keir tomorrow will be setting out why he thinks he's the best person to be Prime Minister, and I'm incredibly excited.
Well, we look forward to that speech. Just a quick eye cast back at last week's conference. Mayor of London, HS2, how do you respond to the decision to call off the link between Birmingham and Manchester?
Look, when I was given some of the challenges in 2018 about the Elizabeth Line Crossrail, one of the options I had was to throw the towel in. To say it's too difficult to finish Crossrail, it's too difficult to get a grip on the costs. I chose not to do so. I sent my people into Crossrail Limited Company. They told me it wasn't fit for purpose. I persuaded the government to let me take over Crossrail. We completed it. The Elizabeth Line is now the most popular train line in the country, used by more than 230 million people so far, 4.2 million journeys a week. If you build it, they will come. I think the government's made a bad mistake throwing the towel in. They've made a bad mistake with this confusion caused by them throwing the towel in. Why would you, as a business person, as an investor, invest in the UK when the government chops and changes policies like High Speed 2? My real problem with High Speed 2 for London is we've now got a High Speed 2 line going from Birmingham and Curzon Street to Old Oak Common. Only the Conservatives could build a high speed line slower than the Victorian line from Birmingham New Street to Euston.
What would you do if you were leader of the opposition with regard to the choice between ruling out reopening it or putting in a position that makes it harder to sell off some of the infrastructure, to sell off some of the land, to essentially send a message to business and voter alike that it could well be resurrected under a Labour government? Because so far Keir Starmer has not done that, has he?
Well, I've spent some time with Keir over the last few days, as you'd imagine. Look, one of the reasons why Keir and Rachel can't write a blank cheque.
That's not quite the question I'm asking. It's more of a formal holding position as opposed to a formal rejection.
Sure. Well, one thing they can't write the blank cheque for High Speed 2 for obvious reasons. We don't know how bad it's going to be in 18 months' time. But what we can do is safeguard the route.
Yes.
And so what we did with the Elizabeth line, but also with the Bakerloo line and with Crossrail 2 we're trying to do, is safeguard the route. Because the problem we've got with the government's messages last week is they may sell off some of the land we need to build high-speed 2. If later on we can afford it. So what I'd want the government to do is to mothball the route. So if at a future date we can have the funds to build it, we can do so. But also in the meantime work with the private sector, with businesses to fund it. I'll tell you another story that people don't realise about the Elizabeth line. One third of it is paid for by businesses, and I want to thank them for investing in this piece of really important infrastructure. Why isn't the government talking to businesses to support them with high speed 2?
Sadiq Khan, many thanks, live from Labour conference in Liverpool, where, as he reminds us, Rachel Reeves due to speak today and Keir Starmer due to speak tomorrow. A helpful line, actually, because I said from the start that I find this particular conversation almost unbearably difficult, and that helpful line, which perhaps has been a little bit missing from some of the discourse so far, although not by any stretch of the imagination entirely absent. So it's perfectly possible to condemn in the strongest of terms the atrocities undertaken by Hamas this weekend, while still expressing solidarity with, sympathy for, and indeed support for Palestinian people. We'll find out next from another guest what might be on the cards militarily in the coming days, weeks, and of course even longer. The time now is 11:51.
This is LBC.
Here, on the severe malnutrition ward, children with empty stomachs cry out in agony. Save the Children is working with families around the world who simply don't have enough food. Acute malnutrition is painful, ruthless, and deadly. But with just £5, there's a simple solution that your support can help quickly provide. Please, go to savethechildren.org.uk and give £5 a month to help stop child hunger.
Get full digital life protection for your devices, digital identity and online privacy. Choose what the experts trust and use. Trusted. Always Bitdefender.
Calling passengers on Welling flight tired of the commute and dreary weather. Your flight is ready to depart. Bienvenidos a Sevilla and to the passion of Andalusia.
This autumn, change the mood. Discover Andalusia with Welling Airlines from just $29.99 one way. Book now at welling.com. Flight subject to availability.
You hear that? That's the sound of your energy use going in reverse. Rewinding, reducing. We're OVO, an energy company that wants you to use less energy. Some may see that as a bit backwards, but we like to see things differently. Join us and see energy from a different angle. OVO.
Are you an absolutely huge fonter or a zoom-inner? Perhaps you're an arm stretched out like a zombie when holding a newspaper, or a holds a book so close you might as well be kissing it, At Specsavers, we get it. You don't want to admit it's time to become a glasses wearer. That's okay. We're ready to see you whenever you're ready to see properly. Book an eye test at specsavers.co.uk so you can see clearer. Okay, we'll stop with the now.
What if a midweek meal could be good? Well, if you don't have to cook, that's a good start. Just grab something from the delicious new Japan menu range from Waitrose, with 26 mains, sides and snacks, like tasty teriyaki salmon, irresistibly tender pork belly, and mouth-wateringly Moorish mushroom gyoza. Good enough to make Tuesday taste like Friday. The new Heat and Eat Japan menu range. Enjoy 25% off. Waitrose. Food to feel good about. Selected stores subject to availability. Introductory offer ends 24th of October.
Thanks, everyone. We're really looking forward to getting this contract approved, so have a good day. Bye.
Bye.
Rufus, aren't you a lovely puppy dog?
Tom, I think you meant to meet yourself.
Oh, yes, they are.
Tom!
That was a bad idea. Unbreakable business broadband? That's a great idea. With BT Enhanced Broadband, our 4G backup powered by EE means you always have a reliable connection. Search BT Business Deals to find out more. BT means business. Terms apply. BT Hybrid Connect and 4G coverage required with average connection in 95 to 127 seconds. Enhanced broadband subject to availability.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:54 is the time, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Running a little late on that junction because of the conversation with the Mayor of London. Dr. Tobias Bork is a senior research fellow in Middle Eastern security studies at the Royal United Services Institute, and joins me now. Apologies in advance for such a silly question in a way, Tobias, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What do you think is likely to transpire next in this escalating conflict?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think it is a very difficult thing to predict at this point, of course. I think we sort of have two paths in front of us. One is that this remains contained to Gaza and southern Israel. I think it's almost certain that Israel's military response will be extremely hard, aggressive, and extensive within Gaza. And we're seeing the beginning of that already. Now, the question, so the first option is that this remains a conflict that is in Gaza, around Gaza, and that is it. The other option is that we do see groups like Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, or some of the militant factions in the West Bank, or others around the region looking to intervene in this, and that then turns into a sort of spiral of escalation that spreads wider. And for Israel itself becomes a two-front conflict, one in Gaza, one on its northern border. But yeah, I think those are currently the two options that we have in front of us.
I mean, logistically, presumably the Israeli forces are far superior.
Absolutely. I mean, look, Israel has by far the most well-equipped, best-trained, strongest military in the Middle East region. So there's no doubt about who has the military, superiority here.
Do you think that they will send troops into Gaza?
I think that is probably the question that Israeli military leaders, but especially political leaders, are weighing right now. Prime Minister Netanyahu has made it pretty clear that he does not see this as yet another round of conflict around Gaza, or I think he put it, not another round of fighting. This is a war. So then the question becomes, what makes it different, right? And I think for a ground invasion, which I think is definitely a distinct possibility, the big question there is the question of the hostages, of course. On the one hand, you would assume that Hamas has taken hostages in order to achieve some kind of objective, in order to perhaps have some form of deterrent effect. But I think that this attack has been of such a scale that any form of deterrence is kind of out of the window. And I sort of expect a very, very strong Israeli response, and I would not be surprised if that includes a significant deployment of ground forces into Gaza.
I see. And finally, Tobias, could you give us an indication of the scale of surprise at the scale of the attack, and indeed, for want of a better word, the success of it?
Well, you hear Israeli leaders right now, right? They're talking about that this is Israel's 9/11. This is Israel's 9/11 and Pearl Harbor wrapped into one. Looking for superlatives to express just how big this is, and I think that answers your question in a way, right?
Well, it answers half of it, because September the 11th kind of was freakish in both conception and execution, and yet Israel knows where the threat lies. It knows specifically to sort of points on a map where the threat is going to come from, and yet somehow all defences were breached on a spectacular scale.
Well, but I think just because it was so spectacular, we have just never seen anything like this, right? This was not a few rockets or even a few hundred rockets. This was a couple of thousand rockets and a sort of very concerted, essentially invasion. No one had expected this. I was had conversations last week with other people sort of looking at regional security and thinking about the different issues that we see coming up over the next few years. And this was precisely no one had this on their sort of radar. So I think it's an enormous surprise. You're right, Gaza is the source of threat. Hamas is the source of threat for Israel, but also one that I think Israel felt like it was able to manage. This weekend, that assumption was completely turned on its head.
And what does that do to Netanyahu's position?
Well, I think that's a big question, right? In the past, Israeli prime ministers have not been able to survive these kinds of security and military failures, right? Golda Meir, Menachem Begin, both of those wear out after significant military and security failures. So, Netanyahu has made security his thing, has some serious questions to answer. I don't think they're necessarily questions that are going to be answered in the next couple of days. Sure. I think that is for once the main part of this conflict, of this war, is over. But yeah, he will have to confront very significant questions, no doubt.
Dr. Tobias Borg, Senior Research Fellow in Middle Eastern Security Studies at RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute. Thank you very much for your time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I've made an executive decision to do something completely different for the final hour of the programme. I'm going to give you a quick heads up. To celebrate 50 years of LBC, 20 of which I've actually been here, which makes me feel like part of the furniture, makes me feel like an old chair. I think we could do an hour of your most memorable moments as a listener. I think that might be quite appropriate, actually, and hopefully quite uplifting. It's 12 noon.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at midday, Israeli defense officials say they have launched an extensive attack on Hamas centers in Gaza. More than 700 people have been killed in Israel, including at least 260 at a music festival since Saturday morning. Around 500 people have died in retaliatory airstrikes on Gaza. Rishi Sunak will chair a Cobra meeting later to coordinate the UK's response to the situation.
Hamas, who's claimed responsibility for the attacks in Israel, is a prescribed terrorist organisation under UK law. And it's Hamas who is responsible for what's happened over the past few days, and we will stand steadfast with Israel in supporting them to defend themselves against these appalling acts of terrorism.
Ministers have warned potential protesters to be extremely cautious about praising the actions of Hamas. London Mayor Sadiq Khan has told LBC police patrols are being stepped up in Jewish communities.
If your place of worship is a synagogue or your school of choice is a Jewish faith school, there's increased, enhanced security. It's upsetting for me to say that. That's the reality of being a Jewish person. That's been enhanced over the last couple of days. But I want to be quite unequivocal about this. There is no place for hatred, anti-Semitism, incitement in London. The full force of the police will come down on you if you try and do those things.
Rachel Reeves says a Labour government would remove obstacles in the planning system. The Shadow Chancellor is setting out the proposals in her speech to the party's conference in Liverpool. They include priority applications for major infrastructure. Labour peer Lord Mandelson has told LBC it's part of the party's proposal of hope and realism.
It's got to make an offer to the British people which convince them that after all that has happened to our country over the last 7 years, we are going to pursue clear policy missions that are going to get our future back as a country.
Almost £1 million in damages has been secured from Network Rail for 7 people affected by the Stonehaven rail crash. 3 people were killed in the derailment in Aberdeenshire in August 2020. Rescuers are searching for an elderly man reported missing in a river after heavy rain swept across Scotland. The 77-year-old was last seen in the River Tay in Perthshire at around 5 o'clock yesterday evening. Flood warnings are still in place for many areas. In the city, the FTSE 100 a short time ago was up 20 at 75.14. The pound buys €1.15 and $1.21. LBC weather. Most places warm with some sunshine this afternoon, but patchy rain continuing across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and northern England. A high of 24 Celsius. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Thomas Watts.
Dear M&S, at Asda we're deeply sorry because in thousands of blind taste tests, hundreds of our products proved as tasty or tastier than yours. Orcs. We call it Taste Match. M&S Taste at Asda price. So try our extra special ribeye steak, thick cut and dry aged for 30 days. So now the stakes are raised, and at Asda, save 25% too. Asda, that's more like it. Selected stores in line, subject to availability. Taste test made to August 23 with M&S Collection British Ribeye. Price comparison in-store 1809.23. For verification, see asda.com/tastematch.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
4 minutes after 12 is the time. Now, I have to warn you in advance that you need a slightly overdeveloped ego to do this job. There are 1 or 2 presenters who have somehow managed to get behind a microphone on LBC over the last 50 years who have never struck me as being possessed of overdeveloped ego. There may even be 1 or 2 on the schedule currently, but I'm not so sure about that, actually. So you do need a slightly overdeveloped ego to do this job, which is fine. And, self-knowledge is a wonderful thing. So I am prepared for other people's programmes to feature more heavily than mine in the hour that follows. Not least because for 30 years of LBC's history, I wasn't even here. I think my first introduction to this station was probably Brian Hayes, who was in this slot and who could quite easily start an argument in an empty room. A supreme broadcaster, one of the absolute best and an absolute stalwart of LBC. Also, for those of us that grew up outside London, watching blockbusters and not knowing that Bob Holness was keeping people company in London on LBC, in the company of the great Douglas Cameron, all sorts of things. But what I thought we'd do today, and I'm going to get loads of text coming in as well, but I'd like you just to share with me and everybody else your most memorable LBC moment. It can be deadly serious, because there have been some astonishingly serious moments. In fact, I think quite possibly Tamar's call from really early doors today will be one of the ones that stays with me for a very, very long time. And it could also be ridiculously silly. See, the problem now is if I give you some of my favourites, then it kind of robs you of the opportunity to ring in and share them. But there is one. When Nigel Farage presented on this station, what was particularly lovely about this was the visual clip, because you could see him visibly preening in the most sort of pathetic way. It was almost twirling his moustaches if he'd had any moustaches, because someone rang in to say that they had voted to remain in the European Union, but they'd changed their minds. And Farage sort of simpers a bit and goes, "Oh, and what prompted you to change your mind?" And he's obviously expecting the caller to say, "Well, I've got to admit it was listening to you." And the caller says, "As cool as you like," without even breaking the beat for a moment, just says, "I got kicked in the head by a horse." And it was, I listen, simultaneously, for a presenter, it was quite chilling, because it can happen to any horse. But also, as a patriot, someone who loves this country and has a deep and abiding problem with the people that have inflicted so much unnecessary damage on it, it was lovely to see one of the worst arsonists and saboteurs get rinsed so effectively in public. So that was, 2 or 3, all saying that one. You're all going for that one already before I'd even shared it with you as one of my favourite moments. 7 minutes after 12. In terms of more serious moments, I had the privilege of meeting a lady called Lily Polman, who was a Holocaust survivor and who rang into the programme. She didn't just ring me, I have to stress. She was a bit of a regular, in fact, on LBC, but she was a storyteller of such astonishing warmth and insight that she relayed her life story and elements of it on the radio so powerfully. I then had the privilege of getting to know her off air, and she joined me on stage for a Make Some Noise fundraising event at the Leicester Square Theatre and became a friend of mine. We lost her during lockdown. I was able to attend her funeral, and that was a very special moment for me. To perhaps echo some of the conversations we've been having earlier in the programme, and I stress that I do want this to be an essentially uplifting hour, but just let me give a nod to the morning of July the 7th when we were on air, and someone sent me a photograph of a motorway gantry that said, "London is closed, turn on your radio." I pray that I never have a moment like that again in my broadcasting career, and I was still very, very wet behind the ears back then, but that gives you an indication of the role that radio in particular or radio in general and LBC in particular can play in the lives of people listening. So 8 minutes after 12 is the time. Look back over your listening years. In some ways, the bigger prizes will be reserved for the oldest memory. You know, if you could remember something from 40-odd years ago, that'd be particularly interesting for those of us who were still in nappies at the time. And give us a call on your most memorable moment from the 50 years of broadcasting that LBC is currently celebrating. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Don't hold back. And I'll tell you something else as well. There's a lovely call with Nick from a chap called Charlie, I think, who said that his father was such an LBC addict that he passed away with us playing in the background. He didn't reveal which presenter was actually on duty during his dad's final moments, but he said he never rang in. He wasn't the sort of person to ring in, and I thought, well, what is the sort of person to ring in? But this is one of those hours where if you're not the sort of person to ring in, whatever that means, then you could actually ring in. This could be one of those this could be one of those moments where you don't really, it's certainly not going to be a scrap, is it? Or you don't have to have a dog in the fight, as it were. You've just got a little memory of something that happened on your radio that tickled you pink. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need, and we'll take whatever you've got, including contributors, presenters who I may not even be aware of. Everyone's done a shift here at some point in the last 50 years. Pretty much every presenter you've ever heard of. Michael Parkinson was in this slot for a while, not a very long while. Richard Littlejohn was in this slot for a while. But those of us who've had the privilege of really being able to keep company for decades rather than years, sometimes need a little bit of a reminder about some of the other stuff. So we'll get the phone lines open. I shall risk going in on the texts, which I'll probably regret immediately. Nathan in Sheffield, kicked in the head by a horse. Nick Abbott every Friday and Saturday night, but on a serious note. He says the first call into Ian Dale's Drive Time show from an eyewitness to Lee Rigby's murder is something that I will never forget. An astonishing text in a way, Nathan, because you've managed to relay in 4 lines how much territory we can cover, how much we can do, the ups and the downs. 46 years ago, as an 8-year-old, I'd listened to LBC under the covers in bed, says Jason. Tommy Boyd was doing a show on words spelt by calculators when held upside down. It's fair to say that the then LBC phone number provided much hilarity. I like that. Another one for the kick in the head by the horse. I think we'll probably park that one now. The angry Scotsman who rang in the day after Trump won and started talking about Obama and Clinton being the Obamas and the Clintons being the devils. We got the lovely lad in Leeds he was from Leeds, but he was living in China. Luke, his name was, who rang in a lot during lockdown. That's a nice one. There have been many good moments, James, but a particularly funny one was when Sheila was having a coughing fit during a call, yet the call still badgered her, the caller still badgered her, and she hung up on him. I don't think you'll find it anywhere, but she might remember, suggests Harge. Your interview, kebabbing with Ian Duncan Smith, that was back in the day. That was before the Farage one. And again, please play the interview. I don't think we'll be playing any clips because we've only just thought of doing this as a conversation. You'd think we'd have known. We've had 50 years to prepare for this. You'd have thought we might have got some clips prepared to look back upon some of our happier moments, or at least not necessarily happier, but some of our memorable moments. But the anonymous civil servant last year who was begging the government to act honourably. Crikey, you're right. I don't think that story's actually over yet. I think there are still some repercussions. And for me, James, says another James, it has to be your Brexit callers. Well, I owe them an enormous debt, actually. It certainly made a huge difference to my career, particularly the lady who complained that she could not have her fish and chips wrapped in newspaper anymore, despite it having nothing to do with the EU. Or when she complained about Wetherspoons still being able to buy drinks from outside the EU when we were still EU members. It is a fairly broad church of memory, which I look forward to exploring a little further with you shortly. The number you need, 0345 6060 973. Phone lines are open. And I just want to know, the Kebab Awards call it. These are all very recent. What's it called when, like, you do what are the top 50 albums and Robbie Williams comes in third? I love Robbie Williams, don't get me wrong, but there's no way that he has released the third finest album of all time. So there's quite a lot of the Kebab Awards call was pretty good, but I don't think it was pretty good, wasn't it? It was pretty special, but I don't know that it would make the top 10 calls of all time. And it doesn't have to be calls, remember. Other shows still have a lot of guests. They can provide absolutely magical moments, or it could be even it'd be hard to explain a monologue, wouldn't it, as being one of the finest moments in the history of LBC, but I'd be more than happy to let you have a go. I'd be more than happy to let you try. Don't forget, you can text 84850, the bloke from Sandbach. Yes, I remember him. The UKIPper from Sandbach. Seb says you barely held it together, but don't make it all about me. What about the lovely lady we took to the opera? Do you remember that? That was quite recent. Her name eludes me, but we managed to sort her out with a trip to the English National Opera, who've got another wonderful show on at the moment, by the way. Aya Lanthi all sorts. And this one, with which I'm tempted to agree, from Marion, almost anything Eddie Mair ever said would constitute a highlight of the last 50 years of LBC. So keep it clean, please. But other than that, anything goes, anything you want. Just 50 years celebration, the first ever commercial radio station in the United Kingdom, and somehow still going strong. It's 12:15.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
The dog had the head the size of a donkey.
Straight to the point.
The schools are crumbling in front of us.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
There we go, from someone who had failed tummy tuck surgery to the man who ran MI6.
Listen on your radio and on Global Player.
LBC's charity, Globals Make Some Noise, makes sure that nobody faces life's toughest challenges alone. And right now, every pound you give online will go twice as far. Thanks to read.co.uk, when you donate to Make Some Noise through the Big Give platform, your donation will be doubled up to a guaranteed £175,000. Visit lbc.co.uk to find out more. Proudly supported by read.co.uk.
It's time to start pruning back for winter. And at Robert Dias, we've got great value garden tools to help with the hard work, like forks and trowels starting from just $1.99. And to make your garden tidy up even easier, our Kingfisher leaf blower now has 40% off at just $29.99. Pop into store today where you'll get a free pair of gardening gloves worth $2.99 when you spend over £40 on our garden range. For all your home and garden needs, find us on your local high street or at robertdias.co.uk. Exclusions apply.
You have worked hard. Your company has flourished, and you are deservedly reaping the fruits of your labour. However, you are now ready to retire and call it a day. But how do you ensure an orderly exit and realise maximum value from your business? At Barnes Rofe, our specialists have been busy helping clients with bespoke succession planning and business exit strategies. Contact us today to help plan for your retirement. Barnes Rofe, clever accountants for business.
This is the agonizing sound of young children with empty stomachs. Save the Children is working with families around the world who simply don't have enough food. Millions of children are hungry because of conflict, displacement, and extreme weather. But just £5 can make a difference. You could provide the life-saving food and medical treatment malnourished children desperately need. Please, go to savethechildren.org.uk and give £5 a month to help stop child hunger.
Hola, Einstein here, just out tucking into Tecos and the best business advice with my friend Deborah Meaden.
Because much like a recipe, in business you've got to get the basics right.
Indeed, and a smart meter can help you track your energy use and costs over time. Oh, I think I miscalculated the hot sauce.
So that's more control of your business budgeting, at least.
Search Get a Smart Meter for Business today. Eligibility may vary. Consumer action required.
James O'Brien on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
I could do this for weeks, it would appear. Pigeon accents from Jennifer, you had to be there. Indeed, all of these you'd have to be there, but you know, Ian says the most memorable moment for me was the emotion in the presenter's voice when he announced that the Queen had passed away. That was Andrew, of course, that was Andrew Marr. And the guy says, Ben Estever, quite a few have mentioned this, that voted Brexit because there were too many brown people in his local supermarket is always a highlight for me, mainly because you were actually quite nice to him, James. Theo Osherwood nearly reducing Steve Bannon to tears, says Pez. I'm so glad that that someone pulled his pants down, and on we go. Oh, mate, that's one of mine, actually, Emma in Ashfield. The guy who phoned you about the funeral. That was Shams in the City, I think. He'd had a funeral for his cat. I was laughing so much. And so was I. That if we'd actually had this idea before 10 to 12 today, we probably would have got that one ready. I don't know where it would be in the archive, but that was astonishing, that call. Truly, I mean, wetting yourself territory. And at the other end of the scale, says Emma in Ashfield, your chat with Bill Browder. It was captivating, and goodness me, how that has served us well in the ensuing years as the threat that he described Vladimir Putin representing has come to frequent and horrible fruition. Let's go to Annette, who's in Kingston upon Thames. Annette, go on, what's your memory?
Hello.
Hello.
I've been listening for about 40 years, which ages me.
40.
But in the late 80s and early 90s, I used to go home by cab from work in the evening.
Yes.
And all of the cab drivers would have LBC on. And if they didn't, I'd ask them to switch it on.
Good,
And
thank you for that.
we also listened to Clive Ball, who was on earlier
Of course.
than he is now. And he had one particular caller who was also a cab driver. He was a black cab driver. And let's just say, he wasn't the sharpest tool before. And I apologise if he's listening, but this was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
He tried to teach Clive a card trick over the phone. And Clive kept getting it wrong, and he was getting so frustrated. It went on for about half an hour, and I was crying. It was...
No one can do
it's a shame
that.
you haven't got that clip, really, because I can't tell you what the trick even was now. But
No one can do that kind of thing quite like Clive can. I don't think.
He had lots of regulars, yeah.
But also he has that ability to let the line spool out, as if it were a fishing line, so that the fish just can go wherever it wants and do. I don't know that you can do that in the daylight hours. Sometimes the nighttime lends itself a bit to that kind of radio, doesn't it? Nick Abbott, also a master of the genre. I think it's fair to say. And of course, Peter Cook, thank you, Annette. That's a lovely sort of illustration of the way that we can reach parts that other radio cannot reach. I've just tuned in. There's this text that, are you leaving, James? No, this isn't a celebration of my... No, it's the 50th birthday of LBC, literally yesterday, and therefore an opportunity to look back over some of the happy moments. Sven, the Swedish fisherman, was actually Peter Cook. I found this hard to believe until someone played me the tapes. Peter Cook, the comic legend, founder of Private Eye, Pete and Dud, Derek and Clive, that weren't playing any of that out on the radio, used to phone Clive Bull in character as a Swedish fisherman. And Clive was in on the joke, but, that just, it's almost impossible to express the magic of that. Mike's in Weston. Mike, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, I've got so many memories of LBC. It's basically been just a part of my life since I was a kid. I remember sitting in my dad's car listening to Douglas Cameron do the breakfast show on the way into school. And so it was quite an amazing experience for me in the late 90s when I used to get invited on as a talking head on a regular Thursday night show that you had called The Lab. It was in the dark years between when LBC got moved off of FM. It was only on AM, so it didn't have very many listeners at the time.
It was a weird window, that, wasn't it? I'm not fully across it. I think I was still at school, but it was a strange period.
Yeah, it was really strange. Not many people knew that LBC even still existed. So I used to tell people I'm going on LBC. They're like, "Oh, is that still on air?" I didn't realise. But you had this sort of technology magazine show that was run by a couple of friends of mine. Because we were all in. I don't know if you're allowed to ring in with yourself as your favourite LBC memory, Mike. I should perhaps have made this clear. Otherwise, I could easily fill the hour without interruption. Oh, fair enough. No, it wasn't actually me being on the radio. No. It was the excitement of me being invited into the studio and being able to. I think I had to set a tape recorder to record it at home so I could listen back.
Yes, no, I remember that. And that was a big part of what we did, wasn't it? Those kind of advice type stuff. When I started here, I was doing swing at weekends. I think we still had a gardening hour. People would ring in and ask for advice on what to do with their petunias.
Well, it was also very weird for me because I was very young at the time. I was in my early 20s, and to suddenly be treated like this expert that was supposed to know about everything and be, this voice of wisdom on the radio, it was all a little bit overwhelming. But then fortunately it went back onto FM a few years later, and along you came.
And along I came. Thank you very much, Mike. And the audience now is absolutely dwarfs what it was before. It's an astonishing achievement, and going national, of course, has been a glorious success. 23 minutes after 12 is the time. Rob's in Downham Market. Rob, what would you like to say? What made you pick up the phone?
Well, LBC's birthday, of course. I've had so many memories over the years of LBC. Many of them are not happy and horrific in some cases, but it's a happy one.
Yes.
I'm not your oldest listener, but I'm probably one of your longest on LBC. I was invited to your studios, I believe it was Goss Square.
Yeah, behind Fleet Street.
1974, with a school party. It was to do with our English teacher at Burnt Mill Comprehensive in Harlow. I'll get that plug in. And it was about a game that he'd invented where pupils played out in role play a council meeting. And in LBC, we actually just had an interview with one of your presenters at the time. I can't remember who it was, but it was in a downstairs basement studio. And it was so exciting for a 14-year-old boy, and the rest of us really enjoyed ourselves. Then we went on to a town hall somewhere, which I can't remember, for a photo shoot. And then we ended up on the Great Nationwide with Mike Barrett.
Good Lord. So you're doing another one where your favourite memory involves yourself?
Well, to be honest
this
with you,
isn't quite what I envisaged when I talked about ego at the beginning of this hour, Rob.
Well, you know, I'm not quite up to your standards, but I'll be honest with you, it's only through going there that I actually knew of LBC.
Yeah, fair enough.
It was recorded during the week, and they played it back in the morning, either on the following Saturday or Sunday. And I often wonder in the archives whether it still exists, or the Nationwide.
Highly unlikely, mate. Absolutely no chance, actually, probably, is the more accurate answer.
No,
I think
I will say, like the gentleman earlier on the earlier show has had the radio on and he died listening to it. Yeah. Well, I put LBC on when I go to bed. It's on all night, so if I wake up, I hear it. And it's on until I get up in the morning, and it's a godsend, absolute godsend.
We forget that sometimes, but it cuts both ways, you know, especially during lockdown. I was really, really conscious of there being two ends of the conversation, that kind of weird period of broadcasting from a shed in my garden and feeling really oddly dislocated and isolated. I never felt that bond more strongly about both ends of the broadcast, as it were. Thank you, Robert. Yes, when Ian Lee and me had a running race live on the radio, that was fairly memorable. And Rhys in Barnsley says, don't forget your rap. I'd love to forget my rap, Rhys, actually. J to the O to the O to the B. Marty's in Belfast. Marty, what would you like to say?
James, good afternoon.
Hello.
I've been listening to LBC since I think about 2015, 2016.
Okay. So you're quite a newcomer then, relatively speaking.
Relatively speaking. My most favourite moment is a very, very recent one, and it was your live fact-checking of Boris Johnson's resignation letter.
Yes.
I would have preferred a different presenter had it done this slot, because I would still pick this. I think it is one of the most epic bits of radio I've ever heard in my life.
Well, that's incredibly kind of you, but there was an awful lot of material to work with. But I don't know if you heard Eddie Mair's sort of farewell takedown of Boris Johnson around the same time, which even my overextended ego doesn't quite stretch to denying was probably even better, Marty. I think that...
I must have a look for it, because I have re-watched your fact-checking of the letter, I would say at least half a dozen times on YouTube.
That's even more than I have. Thank you. I mean, crikey, there is always that slight worry about what we're going to do if rather than when politics returns to being a slightly more calm subject, where there is a little less meat to get our teeth into on a regular basis, going back really to the referendum and possibly even beyond. But goodness me, the choppy waters that we've had to navigate in the last 10 years at least, probably the choppiest of the entire 50. Thank you, Marty. That was very kind of you. Jeremy Beadle was great on LBC. Must have been around the late 70s, early 80s. He must have had an A to Z, because he often suggested he knew people in roads from the area that they called up in. He also did one of the biggest pranks ever, I think, in radio, and pretended that he was broadcasting the entire show from the London Underground, which would be technically impossible. But Beadle, who I didn't listen to, I only really knew him from Game for a Laugh and Beadle's About later. He was on there when I was still in short trousers living in Kidderminster, but the legend lives on. And he did a thing where he had a producer called Bavin, who was still spoken of in hushed tones when I started here. And he did the entire show pretending to be on the London Underground, to the point where people were waiting for him at stations, because he was doing it all in real time. He said, right, we're now going from South Kensington to Gloucester Road. People were waiting for him at stations. And I think Transport for London got the hump, and they kind of had to warn about disruption, because the people turning up at stations in the hope of seeing Jeremy Beadle presenting the programme from a tube train. When he was back in the studio, he was in the normal studio. It was all completely manufactured and invented, but the levels of creativity involved in that were astonishing. And I just remembered something a bit embarrassing for me. Do you remember when the Beagle got lost in space? Do you remember that? There was scientist, and Alex James from Blur was involved in it. Was it Mars? They sent a probe to Mars called the Beagle. And it got lost, or they lost contact with the Beagle. It was quite a big story at the time, about 10 years ago. So I thought this would be hilarious. I phoned Jeremy Beadle and asked him if I would do something live on the radio trying to make contact with the Beagle that was lost on Mars. And he'd come on the line and say hello, and we'd have a moment of comedy during which it would emerge that I'd actually accidentally got hold of the Beadle as opposed to the Beagle. And I thought that was really funny. And I get a bit self-conscious or insecure sometimes when I'm talking to big Jesus. So I plucked up the courage to ring him, and I ran it by him. I think I did, or did the producer do it on speakerphone? Anyway, I can't remember. His response was, "Oh no, I think that sounds a bit naff, really." And we were crushed. We were crushed. We thought we'd come up with a brilliant treatment worthy of the great LBC prankster himself, but he thought it was rubbish. So thank you for the memory, David. You're right. I think you did have an A to Z in the studio. So you'd ring in and say it's whereabouts in Uxbridge? Oh yes, right. Fine. Do you know Keith on Acacia Avenue? And you just be leafing through the A to Z. 12:30 is the time. Lottie Morley has your headlines.
Israeli officials say they've launched an extensive attack on Hamas centres in Gaza. More than 700 people have been killed in Israel since Saturday morning. Around 500 have died in retaliatory airstrikes on Gaza. Rachel Reeves says Labour is ready to lead and ready to rebuild Britain. The Shadow Chancellor has been addressing a crowd at the party's conference in Liverpool. She also accused the Conservatives of causing economic mayhem. And almost £1 million in damages has been secured from Network Rail for 7 people affected by the Stonehaven rail crash. 3 people were killed in the derailment in Aberdeenshire in August 2020. LBC weather, warm and sunny for most of the UK. Patchy rain for Northern Ireland, Northern England and the south of Scotland. A high of 24 degrees.
LBC.
Regarded at Selco. Selco is where the trade goes.
At Selco Builders Warehouse, we've got real deals on a great range of building products. This month, we've got 15 litres of Leyland Trade Super Latex Brilliant White Matte Emulsion for only £22.49 ex VAT. And with free delivery, that's a real deal. See more real deals online at selcobw.com.
Regarded at Selco. Selco is where the trade goes.
That charged at 20%. Free delivery within local delivery areas.
This is the agonizing sound of young children with empty stomachs. Save the Children is working with families around the world who simply don't have enough food. Millions of children are hungry because of conflict, displacement and extreme weather. But just £5 can make a difference. You could provide the life-saving food and medical treatment malnourished children desperately need. Please, go to savethechildren.org.uk and give £5 a month to help stop child hunger.
Here's something that will blow you away. Heat pumps, the low-carbon future of home heating. And now's the perfect time to upgrade with a £7,500 government grant. And if you get yours from British Gas, we guarantee you'll heat your home to your perfect temperature or your money back. And what's more, we won't be beaten on price. Search British Gas heat pumps. Exclusions and conditions apply. Government grant subject to eligibility.
The London Bath Company presents our customer reviews on the Which Trusted Traders website.
Customer service, 5 stars. Quality, 5 stars. Value, 5 stars.
That's the way it should be. With 100% of Which reviewers recommending us, choose the London Bath Company.
The London Bath Company.
Your new bathroom, designed and installed the way it should be.
Showrooms in Chiswick, St John's Wood, Blackheath and at thelondonbath.co.uk.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. Welcome on board this Wizz Air flight, part of one of the youngest fleets in the skies, with new planes being added continuously. In fact, we're growing our fleet to 500 planes by 2030, and we're named most sustainable low-cost airline at the World Finance Sustainability Awards 2023.
Captain, you're doing it again.
Sorry.
Wizz, the low-cost airline that's a class above. Book direct at wizzair.com.
This is LBC with James O'Brien. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
12:34 is the time. We're not going to touch the sides, are we, on this one? We're really not. A couple of mentions of my old mate Theo Usherwood, actually, which is a mark of the impression he made during his time here. Ben says, hearing Theo's voice after he'd recovered from his, well, you say near-death fight with COVID, it was actually that grim, wasn't it? And we were all so worried about him. I think that's the closest I came to cracking up on air. And then we welcomed him back, and Jane replies with, my favourite ever moment was with two of my favourite people, Theo and Eddie Mair, when Theo's little boy interrupted the live broadcast. Was he flooding the house or something like that? He turned on the hose. What? Yeah, the garden. He was flooding the garden. I missed them both. You and me both, Jane. Christoph's in Wembley Park. Christoph, what would you like to say?
Well, mine are about Clive Bull, and I actually wonder whether I haven't been the victim of his incredible subtlety, because I mean, when you worked out, when you became in the know, yes, and you think, oh, he just. Anyway, my two are. Clive Bull used to have this competition where he used to play a country's national anthem, and people had to ring in to try and work, and say which country it was. And there was a lady called Alicia from Bloomsbury, and she almost always rang in every week and guessed correctly. And your other listeners ring in. And then about 2 years after this, I kind of found this CD which had the national anthems of all the countries on it. Obviously Clive and Alicia both had this CD, and my other Clive Bull one, and this is where I really wonder, am I really a victim of Clive Bull, where I think it must be in the late 80s, 3 or 4 in the morning, Clive received a call, and it was from Frank Zappa.
Oh, yeah.
Now, do you remember Frank Zappa?
Of course I remember Frank Zappa, father of Dweezil and Moon Unit.
Yes. And the thing is that I don't know whether this was on purpose or what, but it appears that Clive Bull didn't really know who he was. He just treated him exactly like he would treat any other caller. And I was going to think, come on, don't you know who this guy is? And I can't remember what they were talking about, or the subject was, because I was like, Clive, how can you be reacting like this to Frank Zappa?
How remarkable. I mean, so why was he ringing in? Was he here on tour, or do we know?
Yeah,
Can you remember?
I don't know. I have no idea. Well, because Clive didn't ask him about that, see? So I didn't say, why are you in London then, Frank? Or something like that.
But that's Clive in a nutshell, isn't it? The most supremely unruffleable man in the history of the world. I didn't know, Christoph, that my friend Kira was with Peter Cook when he used to ring in doing Sven. She was working for him. She says, she's texting me to say, I used to sit next to him when he was calling LBC. I was only 18 or 19 years old. He also did a character, I think, called E.L. Whisty. It's all in Harry Thompson's. Yes. It's all in Harry Thompson's biography of Cook, Peter Cook. Amazing, really, how it gets into your brain, isn't it? And continues to do so. Thank you, Christoph. I like that. 12:37 is the time. Ian's in Birmingham. Ian, what would you like to say? Is Ian in Birmingham? Or is he in... I love that. You can't have a tribute to 50 years of LBC without a line going down. Did you do that on purpose, Ian?
I did, yeah, definitely.
Very good, thank you.
That, right?
Perfect stuff. Look at that for off-the-cuff creativity live on your radio. What would you like to say, mate?
Eddie Mair did a series of interviews with Steve Hewlett after he got diagnosed with esophageal cancer.
That was on Radio 4.
No, it was... Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
I mean, that's absolutely fine. We're not the only radio station in the world.
But LBC, so I'm just terrible at timescales.
No, that's absolutely fine. You're obviously one of the people that Eddie brought with him when he came over from Radio 4.
Nice to be here.
But that didn't happen on LBC.
Well, all right then. In that case,
any other night? Thank you. Yes.
Little schoolboy with Theo every single time you spoke to him.
Yeah, it's nice to see Theo getting so much love. Quite a few people picking up on that. Thank you, Ian. And it was incredible radio, and the late Steve Hewlett, of course, a legend in his own right. But just one of the many reasons why Eddie was a one-off. Is still a one-off. He's not dead. He just semi-retired. It is 12:38. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, and 50 years into LBC's remarkable story. Just a brief pause to reflect upon some of your most memorable moments. So that it could really go on forever. It really could. Will's in Ascot. Will, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi James. No, just a bit of a personal anecdote. So, growing up, sort of 10, 11 years old, my mum always used to have you on in the car, and we we kind of had a game in my brother where we would listen to you and your kind of amazing extensive vocabulary, and our game was to kind of pick a word each day that we didn't know, look up, and then try and use it in our homework. And I remember quite distinctly one day my English teacher taking me out in front of the class saying how amazing some of the words I was using just from
I'll take all the credit. I'll take all the credit for that one. All the credit.
It was, really good fun. And now, I just kind of relate to you quite a lot. Like,
thank you.
Growing up, similar sort of dad as yours, childhood-wise, went to private school, now at LSE, your alma mater. And just you kind of inspired my love of English,
very
really.
Lovely. Absolutely lovely thing to say. It really is, and I appreciate it. And what a clever mum you've got as well up there. I love doing that. We nearly did Word of the Day at one point, but Susie Dent does such a sterling job of it on Twitter that there's no point us joining in. She also knows way more words than I ever will. And Susie is the guest on this week's Full Disclosure, actually. So if you do share me and Will, or my and Will's enthusiasm for new words, then, or new to us, not neologisms, but words that are new to you, then the Susie Dent interview on Full Disclosure this week is an absolute joy. Ian Dale masterfully setting Liz Truss up to confirm that she'd also changed her mind about Brexit. That was Eddie Mair. That wasn't Ian. Ian's done some sterling broadcasting over the years, but that exchange with Liz Truss, with Eddie, was like, people haven't changed their minds about Brexit. And then he said, here it is, Steve sent it in, actually, would you believe? I'll just share it with you now. Eddie Mair interviewed Liz Truss about Brexit in 2018. Eddie said, what about all the people who've changed their minds? And she said, I don't think people have changed their minds. And he said, well, you've changed your mind. You know, really, that was a very early indication of what we could expect from Liz Truss when she became Prime Minister. People haven't changed their minds. Well, you've changed your mind. And then there's a pause, and there's just sort of... I have, that's true. I found the cat funeral tape, but it's quite long, and I don't actually know. I don't know if it's going to live up to expectations. Let's talk to Henry Riley first, LBC's reporter, who is at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool, where Rachel Reeves has just completed her speech. Henry, what did you make of it all?
That's right, around 40 minutes or so we heard from the Shadow Chancellor, ready to serve, ready to lead, ready to rebuild Britain. She used that phrase on 5 or 6 occasions, and I think I have to say it's probably the best speech Labour members have heard from Rachel Reeves. She delivered some of it looking straight down the barrel of the camera, addressing voters, but then a lot of it was sort of playing up to the hall as well. There were some very funny moments. She was saying that she supports the government's smoking ban, but with a shortage of fag packets, what on earth are they going to write their next policy on, which got a bit of a cheer in the audience. Liz Truss might be out of Downing Street, but she's still leading the Conservative Party, and she referenced Liz Truss's name on a few occasions, and it went down understandably very well with members. They were saying, she said, never again will we allow a repeat of the devastation that Liz Truss and the Tories inflicted on family finances. But actually, James, the biggest cheer of the whole speech, really, the whole 40 minutes, was when she reiterated Labour's policy to close the tax loophole which exempts private schools from paying VAT and business rates. That got, I think, the biggest cheer of the conference so far.
Interesting. The polling suggests that as well, actually. I don't know if you saw it this weekend, but it's almost as if the Labour Party is a little bit closer to public opinion than newspaper columnists and pundits. Remind us what the forthcoming highlights are, Henry.
Yes, well, by the way, Jim, just to add something I forgot to mention is that the overspill for Rachel Reeves' speech was absolutely huge. So the whole, firstly, the main conference was about double the size in terms of capacity what the Conservatives had.
Oh, really?
And that was filled out. Oh, and it was busy. There were people waiting for 40 minutes before the speech, so they were there with their sort of Labour membership cards at 11:20, and they didn't get in. It was so busy, and there are various overspill rooms. And actually, if you tot up all the overspill rooms, including where I was watching it, because I didn't get in, I only got there half an hour before, I was turned away. It was more than, I think, a lot of the Conservative speeches from last week. So the overspill rooms actually had more people listening to Rachel Reeves than Mark Harper last week, to give you one name, because his event was perhaps one of the less well attended.
More people in the overspill rooms for Rachel Reeves than there were in the actual hall for Mark Harper.
Undoubtedly.
Is that what
undoubtedly.
You're saying?
It's a huge event. It was really sort of, if this is Glastonbury, Rachel Reeves is the Mick Jagger.
Let's not get carried away. What does that make Keir Starmer then?
Well, I would say
Jay-Z?
Phil Collins, but
The mind boggles.
My knowledge of Jay-Z.
Keir Starmer, I know, we haven't got time to go through the greatest hits of Genesis. Keir Starmer on stage tomorrow, he'll presumably expect an even bigger response, an even bigger crowd.
He will, and it's a huge speech for Sir Keir Starmer, really. This is going to be a massive moment for his premiership. I understand that he's going to really focus on 5 missions that he's set out. There are various ones, from growth to healthcare and for having a greener future. He's going to really turn, from what I understand, James, what he's going to seek to do tomorrow is turn those missions, which you speak to sources in the Labour Party, they do accept that they are fairly, perhaps tenuous, they haven't really got a sort of a clear directive in terms of a policy outcome. Sir Keir Starmer's going to do tomorrow, I understand, is really turn those missions into policy. So expect to see a lot of substance. It's often levied at Sir Keir Starmer that really they haven't come up with enough policies, and he will argue, well, we're still some way out from an election, and he doesn't want the Conservatives perhaps looking at any of those policies in a favourable way and taking them on themselves. But tomorrow, all about substance, really. We're going to hear a lot about Keir in terms of his private life, in terms of his backstory, that is personal life. That is often what we hear at these party conferences, so expect a lot of that. But really, speaking with sources last night, it's going to be a lot of meat on the bone. If they're going to end this line that really you don't know what Sir Keir Starmer stands for, he's going to be very upfront, very clear what his priorities for a Labour government are, and expect to hear those same words that Rachel Reeves uttered: ready to serve, ready to govern. They really are presenting themselves as that government in waiting.
But are they ready to stand up and fight?
Well, we haven't heard any of that yet. Penny Mordaunt isn't here, but I'll let you know if she wanders in.
We'll have to wait and see. Henry Riley live from Liverpool, where, as you hear, as you know, the Labour Party are having their annual conference. We, meanwhile, back in London, are celebrating 50 years of LBC by reflecting upon some of our most felicitous memories, or indeed most moving memories, on the question of that anniversary. I don't know. I'll take advisement during the next junction on whether or not we play out the whole 6 minutes of the Cat funeral call, which I thought was the essence, in a way, of the magic that sometimes appears on your radio without anyone planning it or being able to predict it or knowing that it's going to happen.
Coming up at 1 on LBC, Sheila Fogarty.
As a complete siege of Gaza is ordered, Israeli families wait in agony for missing relatives. What is going to happen next?
Sheila Fogarty on LBC.
Get ready for a Halloween to remember. Little Monster Market presents Dead Good Value, starring costumes from $5.99 and featuring spooky decorations from 99p. Coming to a Little store near you. Now that's big on quality and always little on price. Subject to availability, selected stores excludes NI.
Here's something that will blow you away. Heat pumps, the low-carbon future of home heating. And now's the perfect time to upgrade with a £7,500 government grant. And if you get yours from British Gas, we guarantee you'll heat your home to your perfect temperature, or your money back. And what's more, we won't be beaten on price. So that's British Gas, heat pumps. Exclusions and conditions apply. Government grant subject to eligibility.
You probably didn't know my dad, Robert, but when he was alive, he made a will and left a gift to Macmillan Cancer Support. It means that in many ways, he still lives on. The advisor, helping a patient get a grant to pay their energy bills. Dad made that happen. The nurse, advising a mastectomy patient on what to wear to her son's wedding. That was also because of him. Almost a third of Macmillan's vital services are funded by gifts and wills from people just like my dad and you. So search Macmillan Legacy today and help them do whatever it takes.
A cluster. A cluster happens when marketers group very different customers into one tangled mess. But MailChimp uses real-time behavior data to help marketers personalize emails for every customer, turning customers into customers. Intuit MailChimp, the #1 email marketing and automation brand, based on customer numbers. For verification, email advertising at MailChimp.com.
At Co-op, members can get £5 off when they buy 3 bottles of wine. White, red, rosé or fizz. We've got it all with over 200 wines to choose from. So whatever your tipple is, and whoever you're enjoying it with, we've got you covered. Pop into your local Co-op today. And 17th of October, selected products subject to availability, member price valid in store only. Please drink responsibly, 18+.
I've just sold my car.
All right.
I got a quote in 30 seconds from We Buy Any Car. Drove to my local branch in 13 minutes, and cash is getting sent to my bank.
Oh, nice.
Just sold my car to We Buy Any Car. Just sold my car to We Buy Any Car.
To find out how much your car's worth in 30 seconds, enter your reg number now at WeBuyAnyCar.com. Admin fee may apply. For more information, visit WeBuyAnyCar.com/info.
You hear that? That's the sound of your energy use going in reverse. Rewinding, reducing. We're OVO, an energy company that wants you to use less energy. Some may see that as a bit backwards, but we like to see things differently. Join us and see energy from a different angle. OVO.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC with James O'Brien.
10 to 1 is the time. Mike says I won't get on air with this because I've already been on once this hour, but I have a very clear memory of sitting outside my office, unable to get out of my car because I was listening to Frank Lampard call in to hold you to account. And he adds that and the time I bumped into you in Covent Garden and you didn't have the foggiest who I was. I remember both events. It was I think it's the only Sony award I ever won was for that, frankly, bizarre Frank Lampard conversation, to which there is a postscript that I will never be able to share, I don't think, until I write my memoirs. 10 to 1 is the time. 50 years in. Please, 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 please play The Cat Funeral, says Jamie in Cumbria, whereas Jackie confines herself to just 2 pleases. Please, please, Cat Funeral. It was the funnest. I think we will, but we'll take 1 or 2 more calls first. Ali's in Dartford. Ali, what can you remember? What's your happy memory? Or
James.
Yeah.
Sorry. I just want to remind you of Gary from Quiz of the Week. Do you remember Gary?
What did he do?
Oh, the guy who just would not answer your question. You kept asking to mention the name of an actor, living or dead, and you kept saying an Australian. Yeah. Oh, do you know, I still play it today, James. I still play it. Every now and again I have to play it because it's hilarious.
It was surreal, wasn't it? Funny, it would be impossible to believe that it wasn't actually scripted, but he was for real. He was completely for real. The Quiz of the Week.
Researcher. I said, oh no, and she said, what was whose show was it on? I think it was on James's show, Quiz of the Week. I thought, my God, I'm old, aren't I?
I don't think she was born.
You,
I'm not sure she was born when we did that. That's how old we are now. That was my second favourite. Do you know what my favourite was on Quiz of the Week?
What was that?
It was a lady rang in, an older lady, and the question was, how many kings of England have been called Henry? And she went, oh, well, she said, I know there was Henry V. And she said, and there was Henry VIII, wasn't there, James? And she went, is it 3?
Brilliant, isn't it?
I mean, I thought that was priceless, but we are going to, in the spirit of the days when we were perhaps a tiny bit less serious. Well, the world was a less serious place back then. Well, I'll just let it take care of itself, but it is quite long.
A cat, family pet of 13 years, fell ill, had cancer.
Yeah.
We took it to the vets. The insurance had lapsed for one reason or another because whilst my wife was pregnant, the insurance was under her name, which she forgot. So it's one of those things. Yeah. The insurance had lapsed. So suffice to say, we ended up paying probably about £6,000-7,000 for all the chemotherapy, the scans, and everything to give him probably about 9 months of life.
I remember. Yes, I do remember now.
Okay, so
£6,000 or £7,000, so about £1,000 a month, give or take.
Yes.
Those are the kids, right?
Yeah, for the kids and also for my wife. My wife and I are in a fortunate position. We're in well-paid jobs. It would have been hypocritical for us to be spending thousands on our hobbies and not on what we saw was a family member.
Yeah.
Okay, so even to the point where when the cat was due to be put down, because the vet had got to know us so well, they came round and did put him to sleep at home, as opposed to in a clinical environment of a surgery.
Yes.
Anyway, so now it comes around to the funeral, and I don't know. I mean, I've spoken to you several times, James, and you're an evangelical atheist. It was difficult for me to say to my children, look, we're going to bury the cat, and the cat's going to go to catty heaven. I couldn't. It was just so difficult for me. So I thought, okay, what's the best way we can do this?
Yeah.
We thought, okay, we can cremate the cat, take him out to sea, let the ashes then go up with the atmosphere. So I've been explaining to the kids, look, these atoms, and he's everywhere you are. Every time it rains, every time you breathe, he's with you. You don't have to have this he hasn't got to catchy heaven, but he's everywhere. His atoms are everywhere. He's gone up in with the
atmosphere.
Yeah, with the atmosphere. Sorry. So that was my way of trying to.
How did that work out for you?
Very well, because I'll tell you at the end. Anyway, so I'm travelling. I travel quite extensively for my job.
Yeah.
My wife says she will organise the funeral. So it's fine. So for the cat.
Yeah, right.
So the cat's been taken after the cat was put down. The cat was taken away by the.
What was the cat called? Can we give it a name? I feel it's all a bit anonymous. Jojo. Poor old Jojo.
James, please do not try and speak up because
Mate, I'm not. I'm with you, mate. I don't know how I'm holding it together. Get on with the story, seriously. Poor little Jojo.
Jojo was taken away by the vet and was cremated and was sent back in a ethical, recyclable container that would dissolve in water eventually.
Right. A cardboard box.
So my wife, the cardboard box that cost £300.
An ethical, decomposable. What's the word? What do they call it? Stuff that decomposes in the biodegradable box. Yeah, all right. Carry on. 300 quid. I saw you coming. Carry on, sir.
So my wife's called me. I'm working on, and my wife's called me and said, "Look, I've organised a funeral. It's going to be this Saturday. It's in Brighton.
Where do you live?
In Waltham Abbey. So he said, that's good."
What's it got to do with Brighton? Right? Sorry.
Brighton is a place we go quite often as a family.
Okay.
It's the nicest. It's a nice area. Brighton's
I know.
Brighton.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just didn't think anything of it. The Saturday comes, so we all drive down to Brighton, a family of 4, with the cat in the ethical recyclable box.
Yeah.
We turn up at Brighton Riverina. We eventually find this boat. Now, this boat, I was thinking it was going to be a dinghy, one man in his dinghy, with a little GPS device, because apparently he will mark the corners where you laid him to rest and then provide that to you.
With like a matter grid reference, as it were.
Yes.
That's nice.
Yes.
That's nice.
Yes. So I'm taking James. I can hear the...
Oh, no, you can't, mate. Seriously, no, you can't. I've changed.
So I'm thinking it's going to be one man and his dog and a dinghy. Turned up, and it's a proper funeral boat.
No way.
That holds about 40 people. So we turned up. There's 4 of us and this box. And the guy said to me, "Look, no funeral parlour's got in touch with me about picking up the body. I'm taking the bodies coming later." I went to tell her, I said, "No, the body's with us." And he's looked at us as if to say, "Hang on, are you sure? There's 4 of you and a cat."
So your wife not mentioned she'd managed to book a barge, a funeral barge, a floating hearse, without mentioning that it was not a human that you were saying?
No, she did everything online. She did it all online. She hadn't actually spoken to the guy. I tried my best. I mean, I tried my best not to snigger. I can see the funny side now, but it was a very, very, how can I put it? Not spiritual. Spiritual is the wrong word, but for the kids, it was a nice way for them to say, yeah, it worked. Because the following day when it rained, the first thing is my kids said, "Look, we want to go outside and stand outside in the rain because we want to be close to Jojo."
Oh, mate, that's just lovely. And I have been sniggering, but I'm not going to snigger at that. That's you know, that's why you did it. Had the captain done any other cats?
Sorry?
Had the captain of the boat ever done a cat before?
No, I didn't. But the thing was, because it's biodegradable box, we put it out at sea, but it took 35 minutes for it to sink. So we sat there for 35 minutes. I shouldn't be laughing. I feel so bad.
I can't believe the cat wasn't called Bob. No, I know it's not. And what was all in? How much did it set you back today? Leaving aside the petrol to Brighton and stuff, just for the service, the ceremony.
Probably about £1,000. It was £850 for the boat. Then obviously the degradable thing was about 200, but 2-3. I don't know. My wife.
Job done. It took me ages to remember what that phone-in was about, actually, but it was about excessive amounts of money spent on pets, which I would approach very differently now. That was about 7 or 8 years ago, since when I've become a dog owner. But it just goes to show, and a little bit of light relief from the very serious news that we have spent the first 2 hours of the programme contemplating, and to which Sheila will be returning imminently. If you did miss any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, rewind live radio, or enjoy the whole show podcast. You'll also find all of LBC shows there to catch up on, as well as your opportunity to stay up to date with the latest news from LBC. Rewind live radio on Global Player. Download it for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Swarbrick will be with you at 4, but now it's time for Sheila.
Thank you very much, James. The Israeli military says a complete siege of Gaza is coming. Air attacks have been constant between Gaza and Israel since the weekend. Terror attacks on the ground in the south of Israel. Scores of Israeli hostages are inside Gaza, making any plans for a ground invasion by Israeli troops even more high risk. And what about here in the UK? Pro-Palestinian protests and celebrations in British cities and towns. A kosher restaurant in North London vandalised. And the Prime Minister holding a Cobra meeting this afternoon to discuss the Israel-Gaza situation. What's happening, it seems to me, is far too grave for the shouting matches I'm seeing on social media. I tried very hard to avoid on social media, so let's try different, shall we, and listen to one another.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 1 o'clock, Rishi Sunak will chair a Cobra meeting this afternoon to discuss the Hamas attacks in Israel. More than 1,000 people have been killed on both sides since Saturday morning. Israel's defence minister has ordered a complete siege on Gaza, calling the attack the country's 9/11. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned civilians there to leave before launching retaliatory attacks, but it's not possible as it's blockaded territory. Shayna Lowe from the Norwegian Refugee Council is in East Jerusalem. She told LBC there needs to be a pause in fighting to make it possible for aid to enter the area.
We need to be calling for the international community to be calling for humanitarian pauses so that humanitarians can go and assess the damage and reach people in need. We need humanitarian corridors established so that supplies can safely enter Gaza to the 2.2 million civilians living there.
The Foreign and Commonwealth Office is advising against all but essential travel to the region. Wizz Air and Virgin Atlantic have cancelled all flights to and from Tel Aviv as a result of the conflict. British Airways has also made changes to its flight schedule. Labour's Shadow Chancellor says the party is ready to lead and ready to rebuild Britain. Rachel Reeves accused the Conservatives of causing economic mayhem at the Labour conference in Liverpool. She's been setting out proposals for what the party would do if they win the next election.
Out of the wreckage of Tory misrule, Labour will restore our economic credibility. We will lift our living standards, make work pay, rebuild our public services, invest in homegrown industries in every corner of our country, and together we will get Britain its future back.
Rescuers are searching for an elderly man reported missing in a river after heavy rain swept across Scotland. The 77-year-old was last seen in the River Tay in Perthshire yesterday evening. Flood warnings are still in place in many areas. And almost £1 million in damages has been secured from Network Rail for 7 people affected by the Stonehaven rail crash. 3 people were killed in the derailment in Aberdeenshire in August 2020. In the city a short time ago, the FTSE 100 was trading up 7 points at 75.02. The pound buys $1.21 and €1.15. LBC weather, warm and sunny for most of the UK. Patchy rain in Northern Ireland, Northern England and the south of Scotland. A high of 24 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Lottie Morley.
Is this a wind-up? It has to be a wind-up. Apart from the birth of my children, this is the best phone call I've ever received in my life.
This is what it sounds like when people win big with the National Lottery. Will you be next? The National Lottery. It could be you. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 18 or over.
BBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Sheila Fogarty.
Hello, good afternoon to you. I will bring you any breaking significant developments in the situation in Israel and Gaza this afternoon. Stay with LBC throughout the day for all of that. But I want to speak really directly and actually with as much humility as I can muster in this, because I think most of us will accept that the history of this situation is so complex and so deep and so multifaceted that from this distance, I think very few of us, unless we study it daily, have a full grasp of events. But I want to start really by saying this to you. The roll call of recent Islamist terror attacks in the last few years is a long one, isn't it? That ranges from murdering children at a music festival in Manchester, arena in Manchester, to the brutal stabbing of the Conservative MP, Sir David Amess, in a suburb in Essex. To that, we can now add the Supernova Festival in southern Israel, the abduction of scores of men, women and children into Gaza, and the more than 20 Israeli towns raided by Hamas over the weekend, not all of them liberated yet. And I know that many of you listening feel a very deep and completely justified fellow feeling for the people of Gaza, who just want what we want, a safe life with even modest prospects. And the Palestinians of Gaza arguably do not have that at the moment, in part because of aspects of Israeli policy, but not in total because of Israeli policy by any means. You might believe that the weekend's attacks, and clearly, having seen news over the weekend and read social media, a lot of people do think that the attacks are long overdue retribution for the wrongs done to the Palestinians in Gaza. I happen, and I say this with humility, I happen to strongly disagree with you about that equivalence, and I disagree on two fronts. The first, abducting women and children and raping and brutalizing them is terrorism. Shooting dead elderly Jews at a bus stop because they are Jews is terrorism. Parading a woman's body around Gaza because she is a Jew is anti-Semitic terrorism, to be precise. Murdering 260 also young civilians at a music festival is terrorism, just as Bataclan was, just as the Manchester Arena was. And the second reason I disagree with those who give this equivalence is that Hamas is a self-declared violent Islamist group with a founding political wing, of course. Its closest ally on the ground at the moment is a group called Islamic Jihad. The clue is in the name. According to Al Jazeera, the relationship between the two groups has been tense when Hamas has, in the past, exerted pressure on Islamic Jihad to stop attacking Israeli civilians and other Israeli targets. It looks as though Islamic Jihad is winning that particular argument with Hamas. So their primary aim is the destruction of Israel and every Jew in it, be it a Holocaust survivor in a wheelchair, a 6-year-old child, a happy young music fan, or a heavily armed Israeli soldier. What they see, above all, is a Jewish person to kill. Now, despite the undoubted suffering of Gazans, and I very much want to talk about that and hear about that from you in the next couple of hours, suffering which the international community, for sure, has not responded to sufficiently well and really must address. Hamas's founding principle of essentially Jews out by any means isn't a response to Israel's political and military actions. It is Hamas's deeply held and only principle. And this weekend should, if you're really looking, it should be the only illustration you need that Hamas will do anything in the service of that principle. Israel is not the same as that. It's not that. That isn't to say that it gets its policies right all the time. It isn't to say that its government hasn't been in disarray in recent months, in cahoots with extremely worrying extreme politicians, or defensible, taking defensible actions all the time over the years. It hasn't. But it isn't that. It won't do anything in the service of a principle that is essentially a principle of death. And the reach of violent Islamism, we know. We've seen it here, we've seen it in Paris, we've seen it in Nice, we've seen it all over the world, Africa, you name it. It's global. Add to that London Bridge, Westminster, 9/11, the Chibok girls. The perpetrators of violent Islamism will tell you time and again that all roads lead to Israel. That isn't true either. It doesn't explain the all roads lead to Israel claim. It doesn't explain the Yazidis on Mount Sinjar and what happened to them, or the abduction and rape and enslaving of schoolgirls by Boko Haram or Al-Shabaab in parts of Africa. All roads do not lead to Israel. And the situation in and around Israel right now, I believe to my fingertips, is too grave for the kinds of shouting matches we have seen on social media over the weekend. There's been some vital information and exchanges on social media as well, that's worth saying. But even just a couple of comments that I put on there, which were not shouting match material and were not extreme or ignorant of people's experience in any way, led to people trying to draw me into those kinds of conversations, and I really don't want to have them, not on social media and not with you. I want to have a conversation where we can listen to one another, wherever you come at from this, where we can have a conversation where we listen to one another and be educated, perhaps, by one another, or be given food for thought by one another, have our minds changed on some fronts by one another. But what you will not be able to do is to change my mind about the fact that what we saw on the ground in the south of Israel on Saturday, and continuing for all we know, we don't know the exact details of what's going on in every place, is terrorism. If you have family or friends caught up in the weekend's events, I'd love to hear from you as well. Your thoughts on anything that's going on there and anything that you've heard me talk about. 0345 6060 973. I'm joined by Jonathan Freedland, Guardian columnist and co-host of the Unholy podcast, which covers Israel and the wider Jewish world. Jonathan, thanks for joining me this afternoon.
Good to be with you.
It's very difficult to know where to begin with this, isn't it? Why don't we start with the latest announcements from the Israeli military, this siege of Gaza, total siege of Gaza. What do you imagine the thinking is there?
I think they want to put an end to any more infiltrations, any more entries into Israel from Gaza. I mean, we all saw those astonishing pictures of a tractor, kind of bulldozer, just tearing down the fence. And that made Israelis conclude that they were not protected, that it's not really a border because there's no settled determination of the geography of these places. So, but it made Israelis feel the boundary is not secure. If Hamas operatives can just cross that line and go straight in. And so, in a way, how I interpret this to me is a kind of, we've got you surrounded. We're going to prevent movement in or out, a state of siege. And that really, I think, is from the Israeli defense establishment's viewpoint, that's the miles of the two options, because the other option is a full-scale in-ground incursion where Gaza is recaptured. Remember, Gaza used to be boots on the ground occupied by Israel, and in 2005, Israel, so in its words, disengaged. It just moved out. It took out its settlements and went out. And so, there are voices in Israel saying, reinvade it, recapture it. And I think siege is meant to be the sort of mild alternative.
That's interesting. But the fact of the hostages also being in there, and we don't know the exact numbers, but a good number of people, of Israeli people who were taken into Gaza, it inevitably will be a factor. But even without that factor, it would be a sensitive and incredibly sort of ground-shifting thing to do, wouldn't it?
It would massively up the ante to reverse a policy of nearly 2 decades by going in. And you just imagine, does Israel even have the military capacity, the people, the equipment to do such a thing? But I think, the as you mentioned in that very eloquent introduction to this whole item, you said there that the presence of hostages complicates things. I think for the Israeli military, they cannot go in clumsily, and because the very people they would want to target, Hamas military positions would be exactly where they suspect or fear women, children, elderly, hostages are being kept. So their hands are really tied. And we should say, I know you've conveyed it, but I think it's worth just stressing quite, because I think people hear the eruptions of violence every now and again. They happen, every year or every 18 months or whatever. This is not one of those. This is on a different scale, and people are calling it Israel's 9/11. If you think of the proportions, when you're talking about hundreds of dead in a country of less than 10 million, it's a 9/11 style event. And it's even a kind of Pearl Harbor event, an event where the country is caught unawares. So it's just a very big deal, and I think people are bracing for something bigger than just the usual sort of tit for tat.
And we all saw what 9/11 did to the whole world order, let alone to the United States. A word on Netanyahu. I heard one mother this morning on the radio, an Israeli woman whose daughter is missing and was at the festival, the music festival. And she was furious with Netanyahu, and she said, in terms, more furious with him than with Hamas. She doesn't expect any better from Hamas. Furious. He said repeatedly, and the military have said it, and the various political leaders have said, we will protect you, you will be safe. Someone's eye has been off the ball in a big way, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think that piece of this is huge. I've heard from people who are staunchly anti-Netanyahu, left-wing people who couldn't stand him for his policies on democracy or the fact he's on trial for corruption, but conceded that when it came to security, his brand name as a kind of Mr. Security, almost grudgingly, but you'd have to hand it to him. He does know how to do that, they would say. Even those people are now saying they feel the ground has fallen away from beneath their feet, because if he, this figure of the right, hawkish, tough, meant to be tough on Israel's neighbours, if he was so obviously asleep at the wheel, caught unawares, running the government, for most of the last 15 years, and yet able to allow this attack to go past without any warning at all. I mean, huge questions about the military command, the establishment, but he's the man at the top. And the feeling had been a kind of trade where a lot of Israelis didn't particularly like him, but they felt at least he will protect us. That has gone. The parallel now is with Golda Meir, the Prime Minister in 1973, who was there when Israel was attacked, surprise attack on Yom Kippur, just 50 years and one day before.
But that was a nation-state, a small nation-state war against Israel, wasn't it? Rather than the kind of terrorist tactics we've seen.
For sure. No, absolutely. Attempted invasion by Egypt to the south and Syria to the north. But it made Israelis at the time feel, wow, there's no one...
we could be wiped out.
There's no terrorists. We could be wiped out. It was a kind of existential fear, the trauma of which lives on. I mean, there are people, veterans of that conflict, still around, and the trauma lives on. This is that, but even worse, in a way, because, as you say, it wasn't attacking military targets, it's civilians who were taken, snatched from their beds, snatched from their homes, children, reports of a woman with Alzheimer's being dragged away and taken and interrogated by Hamas. It goes to the most visceral fear that people have, which is they are just not safe, even in their own homes, not in occupied territory, but within Israel, proper, and the feeling that Netanyahu, who presented himself as Mr. Security, let it happen and was unaware.
And Jonathan, I know, because I listen regularly to your Unholy podcast with your co-presenter, Yoni, is it Yoni Levy? Forgive me, I forgot his name.
Yoni Levy, yeah.
Yoni Levy. And in which you also talk frequently about the decisions Israel is taking. Inevitably, in the conversation I'm inviting from callers, I'm going to get a lot of people saying Israel also does X, Y, and Z. Let's say, for the sake of argument, under Netanyahu, how has Israel's approach to Gaza and to controlling that threat from Hamas, how is it viewed by more sort of moderate Israelis, if that's the right word for what I'm trying to say? What criticisms might they throw at him on that front?
Well, I think you're right to put it that way, and the criticism will be, but I think it actually applies to many moderate Israelis too, that they thought about Gaza out of sight, out of mind. that it was on the back burner, that even people who are critical of Netanyahu, who are on the left, their focus has been about the West Bank, and it has been about making an accommodation with the Palestinians there, with Gaza almost sort of thought of as contained. And that's partly because Israel did do what moderate voices, what the peace camp, what the left were demanding, which was to pull out, to uproot those settlements. There was a lot of pushback from those very right-wing settlers who were living in Gaza.
But heavy blockade still has control of airspace, all of that.
That's right. So Israel remains in control of what moves in and out. Gazans are not allowed access to their airspace. They don't have an airport. There's not, the restrictions on even access to their own fishing waters. And that's what the reality that I think people outside the country see. As far as inside Israel are concerned, almost we've gone out, we pulled out, we threw the keys back over the fence and said, right, this is now yours to do what you want inside. But of course, movement control on the outside. And I think what this has exposed is that policy, the kind of out of sight, out of mind policy, was not effective. It is not sustainable. But in the end, Gaza has to be addressed. I don't think many people know how it can be addressed, because the actor there, the player, those in control are, and you said this in your introduction, it's Hamas, the jihadist organization whose founding charter is riddled not with anti-Zionist sentiment or anti-Israel sentiment, but anti-Jewish sentiment. I mean, it quotes from the protocols of the Elders of Zion, a notorious originally Russian forgery, which the Nazis and Adolf Hitler drew upon. It's very, very difficult to see how you come to an accommodation with them. And there were people who were saying that such an accommodation would be possible. That becomes harder to argue when there are 700 Israeli civilians murdered on their streets, in their homes, young, old, and everyone in between. So I don't know even what those moderate voices would be calling for, but I think Israel as a whole not been paying attention to Gaza. They thought their problems lay elsewhere, but now I think it will be central.
And perhaps nor is the world. Thanks very much indeed, Jonathan. Jonathan Freedland, Guardian columnist and co-host of that podcast I mentioned. It's called Unholy. It's very good indeed. Covers Israel and the wider Jewish world. It's 1:21. Your call's next.
LBC.
Amazon Prime Big Deal Days are coming the 10th and 11th of October, with 2 days of epic deals on electronics, home, kitchen and more. You'll feel like you've scored big.
We're live as Ian unboxes his epic deal. Oh, he's got the tape off. He's opened the left lat. Now he's tackling the right. Oh, it's a blender! It's a blender! He must truly feel like a big deal.
Amazon Prime Big Deal Days are the 10th and 11th of October, exclusively for Prime members. Join Prime now.
We love those cosy evenings on the sofa and the crunch of leaves underfoot. But at Win Plus, there's another 8,000 reasons to love autumn, with your chance to win £8,000. Enter now, and it could be you that wins all that cash. Plus, there's a load of other great prizes to win too, like games consoles, home gadgets and great tech. It's all at winplus.co.uk. Great prizes, real winners. 18 plus, GB only, T's and C's apply.
At E.ON Next, we believe life's better when you know that if you need help with your energy, there's a team of dedicated energy specialists who work hard to get it sorted, so you can get back to doing what you like quicker. We think that makes energy a little bit better. And that's why we're always working towards helping you get more out of your energy. So visit eonnext.com today.
Burrito, please.
Go large free of charge.
Go on then.
Complimentary extra beef.
Brilliant.
Chips and guac, footlong churros and a serenade from a mariachi band on the house.
Thanks.
Everyone loves an upgrade. And when you buy the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 5 now, you can claim Galaxy Buds 2 Pro, an S Pen, slim case and a super fast charger on us. Together worth £318. We call it the ultimate upgrade. Buy before 31st of October from a participating retailer. Claim on website within 30 days of purchase. T's and C's apply.
Sky Sports takes you to India for the captivating Cricket World Cup. With a special World Cup offer of £14 extra a month. Nothing beats the exhilarating atmosphere and thrilling rivalries. Nothing beats all 48 matches live for £14 extra a month. Cancel anytime. Search Get Sky Sports to see England defend the captivating Cricket World Cup.
Ecstasy for England!
Offer ends 23rd November. SkyQ required. Further terms apply.
Sheila Fogarty on LBC.
Just a reminder to, and I know, you know, it may be difficult for you to do so, but if you feel up to it and you have been in contact with family out there or are concerned about family out in Israel and Gaza, then do feel free to give us a call and talk to us about that as well as your thoughts on the whole abiding conflict more generally. 0345 6060 973, the usual number. You can text 84850. You can message me on X, formerly Twitter, at LBC. Polly has called from Edgware to start our conversation. Hi, Polly.
Hi, hello. I'm a little bit excited about the situation in Israel, so I'm trying to focus about my English as my first language is Hebrew. So,
okay.
Hi.
Hi. You say it as you see it, Polly.
Excuse me?
Say it as you see it. You just tell us.
Yeah. So I just wanted to explain to the British people the situation as I grew up in Israel, in the south, and we used to have the sirens all the time. People just got panic. My sister got diabetic, and we used to it, but this time it's not realistic. I'm on the line with Israel. I know people, they're just in Gaza now, and we don't know who cares. And I think so if all the world are not going to involve to help Israel, this is the end of the world with the Muslim. We cannot face it anymore. I mean, I can tell you now, I know many Israelis, they are all around the world, they cannot have a flight back to Israel. It's a chaos. It's an unbelievable situation.
And you lived in the south yourself, did you, of Israel?
Yeah, and I came to the holiday by Jewish now, Sukkot, to London. We cannot believe to the situation. I speak to my friends. Slowly but surely, they lose the hope. It's the first time I can add the details. I spoke to my grandmom. She survived Auschwitz, and she said they never believe it's going to happen again. This is a time we have to stand and to say enough. We cannot carry on anymore. And we need the help from the world to help the Jewish community. I don't know if the British people know, but yesterday in Golden Screen, in Pita, meat place, it was a big
kosher restaurant, yes, we do. We're talking about that a little later as well, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the Jewish community also in London needs help from the police to be protected before it's too late.
Well, I'm told that the police are not currently treating that attack on the kosher restaurant as a hate crime, which is interesting in itself, isn't it? So are you literally waiting by the phone to hear about people that you know there, and clearly you can't get home?
Exactly, and I raised money for people in Israel that are stuck without job, with no cash. We're trying in the morning to send a lot of food, and the unique of the people they want to help in Israel, it's unbelievable. They are not just nice people trying to help each other, but we need the help from the world. We need the British people to stand behind the U.S. Otherwise, we don't have Israel anymore. And I'm saying, like, I used to volunteer, like, in the Gaza. I was in the army, and we cannot face it anymore.
What did you do in Gaza?
I was in the army. I made a service when I was 18. And unfortunately, it's a secret. I can't give the details.
Oh, sorry. When you say you volunteered, you didn't mean with a charity. You meant when you were doing your military service.
And I can say also, as a Jewish, we know we have to do a service. And this is the first time I'm listening to mothers that said, we are not going to send the army anymore. We don't believe in the soldiers. We miss many, many teenagers from the party festival, and nobody cares. Nobody calls to the families. It's completely chaos. We cannot carry on.
On that question of what the government did and what failures have clearly happened at a military and government level, how do you feel about that, Polly?
I feel like, as a Jewish, I always liked Israel. I support Israel. But now we feel we don't have behind us anybody. We don't trust Netanyahu. And it's a chaos for a long time between the left side, the right side. And I think so Hamas saved the moment to kill us, because Bibi Netanyahu is completely, he doesn't have any contact to the people. He doesn't know what's going on, and the people just suffering.
Do you think the recent huge protests inside Israel over the changes to the Supreme Court. Do you think, I have to say, it is what I thought when I saw them. I thought, well, this is all very helpful to Hamas, is what I thought. They'll be watching, Israel's local enemies will be watching this mayhem politically and really enjoying it.
Of course, they took the moment. I used to visit Israel, I used to live in Belgium for a few months now for the business, and I came to Israel. We saw the hating between each other and what's going on. I mean, the people don't care about each other, and we know it's gonna happen. And it was a big argument before the holiday between the left side and right side, and we felt something is going to happen. But unfortunately, I think so Bibi Netanyahu lost control. He has to leave the Knesset. He has to leave to be a minister and to let Israel to be back again. We need something new to happen very soon.
Thank you, Polly. I hope you get home soon, but I understand that might be a while. Thank you for calling us today, Polly, in Edgware, an Israeli citizen from the south, the area that's been attacked over the weekend, and on holiday here in the UK. More of your calls in a few moments, and your texts coming in as well on 0345 6060 973. It's 1:30. Let's get some headlines from Lottie Morley.
The government's emergency committee is due to meet later to discuss the Hamas attacks in Israel. 1,100 people on both sides have been killed in a weekend of violence. Extra police are on patrol in London's Jewish communities. The Shadow Chancellor has accused the Conservatives of causing economic mayhem. Rachel Reeves has been addressing a crowd at the party's conference in Liverpool. Rescuers are searching for an elderly man reported missing in a river after heavy rain swept across Scotland. The 77-year-old was last seen in the River Tay in Perthshire yesterday evening. LBC weather, warm and sunny for most of the UK, patchy rain in Northern Ireland, Northern England and the south of Scotland, and a high of 24 degrees.
This is LBC.
Feeling stressed about late payments? To help, Intuit QuickBooks is awarding 3 small business owners a £3,000 travel voucher to unwind in a holiday destination of their choice. Search QuickBooks to find out more and to learn about online invoicing, because getting paid on time gives peace of mind.
At Anna Money, we're searching for a sound to represent the joy you feel when your business gets paid. Could it be a squirrel sneezing? No. Is it the sound of my nephew's laughter? Stop. Terrifying. Yes, that's it. A woof. It's a lovely doggy woof. Simple, happy, life-affirming. The Anna business account chases your invoices for you, and now it woofs when you get paid. That's the sound of a happy business. Search Anna Money to find out more.
Julius Caesar here. I have trust issues, probably because my friends betrayed me to death. So when I need a tradesperson, I don't trust them. I trust Checkatrade. They check all their tradespeople and check the reviews are real, so I know they'll get the job done right without the treachery. Recommendations you can rely on.
At Vision Express, breakage and loss protection is included with prescription glasses and sunglasses.
Really? That's helpful.
Yes, available on designer brands from £129. Find out more in store or online at visionexpress.com. Vision Express. Express your vision. Minimum access required. Conditions apply. Ask in store for details.
Thanks, everyone. We're really looking forward to getting this contract approved, so have a good day. Bye.
Bye.
Is that Rufus? Aren't you a lovely, lovely dog?
Tom, I think you meant to meet yourself.
Oh, yes, they are.
Tom!
That was a bad idea. Unbreakable Business Broadband? That's a great idea. With BT Enhanced Broadband, our 4G backup powered by EE means you always have a reliable connection. Search BT Business Deals to find out more. BT means business. Terms apply. BT Hybrid Connect and 4G coverage required with average connection in 95 to 127 seconds. Enhanced broadband subject to availability.
Here's something that will blow you away. Heat pumps. The low-carbon future of home heating. And now's the perfect time to upgrade with a £7,500 government grant. And if you get yours from British Gas, we guarantee we'll heat your home to your perfect temperature, or your money back. And what's more, we won't be beaten on price. Search British Gas heat pumps. Exclusions and conditions apply. Government grant subject to eligibility.
Sheila Fogarty on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
So the latest from inside Gaza and Israel, the latest events are that Israel has ordered a complete siege of Gaza as rocket attacks continue. So there has been a long-standing heavy blockade by Israel of Gaza for years. But obviously a full siege, cutting off utility supplies, including water and electricity, is a massive move. But as Jonathan Freedland was saying, falls short of a ground invasion, which I suspect might be a last resort. So, to be clear, because there's a lot of terminology around this story that for years as a journalist I've had to go back to time and again and dig down into and make sure I'm using it correctly and understand the implications for everybody. Gaza is not occupied by Israel. So when you hear about occupation, it doesn't apply to Gaza. However, what does apply to Gaza is heavy control by Israel. Controls who and what goes in and out. It controls utilities. It controls airspace, although that didn't stop a paraglider getting into Israel over the weekend. So that's to commit terrorist acts. So that will obviously be a massive question. But the occupation, boots on the ground occupation of Gaza ended in 2005. My question to those of you who rightly, like I said at the very beginning, who rightly have deep concern and fellow feeling for the Palestinians of Gaza, I do as well. What would you want Israel to do? Israel gives a great deal of aid to Gaza through different channels. What would you want Israel to do? Because Hamas's position, again, as I said at the beginning, is they want Israel to not exist. They want it gone completely from the Middle East. So, what do you want Israel to do about Gaza? Because the people who run Gaza at the moment, politically speaking, and in terms of hearts and minds of the people who live there, want the decimation of Israel, the removal of Israel. And if that means brutally killing thousands and thousands of Jews in a kind of removal exercise, they would do it. So what do you want Israel to do in Gaza differently? I mean, it may be that your conclusion is, I agree with Hamas. Well, in which case I can't really do business with you. But your thoughts, because I really want to be clear that concern for Palestinian people in Gaza or anywhere else, those people who've lost their homes for decades now, isn't terrorism and isn't illogical or unjustified. It's absolutely justified and logical. But on the question of Gaza and Hamas, what do you expect Israel to do, if not protect themselves from the horrors that we've seen over the weekend? What do you expect them to do? 0345 6060 973. More of your calls in just a second. Let's just listen to some of the callers from Israel who called over the weekend.
We came under fire ourselves, and twice on the way we had to seek shelter. I was in the city of Ashkelon at the time. Again, major civilian population. We're not talking about military targets. We're not talking about anything like that. We're talking about civilian populations that are being targeted by Hamas.
We spent last night coming in and out of the shelters between around 8 and 10 p.m, probably 5 sirens back to back. So you go into the shelter for 10 or so minutes, come back to the news to see what rockets just flew over you, where did it hit. One actually hit just few 500 or so meters from here in a place called Florentine in Tel Aviv, which was pretty scary.
Jake was my best friend. That's my brother. I've known him for what would nearly be 25 years. I feel completely lost. I feel that I have a million questions unanswered. Why is the biggest question of them all? Why him? And you know, again, for all the other people and all the other families and loved ones who are experiencing the same incident in this desert party, these are people who just, you know, went innocently to go and have their fun. It's just incredibly jarring to know that we haven't been able to have contact with him since yesterday morning.
and many families still waiting to hear news of loved ones who've either been abducted or killed, people who are missing in their scores of people missing. I'm joined by Mahmoud Shalabi, acting Gaza director of the charity Medical Aid for Palestinians. Good afternoon to you, Mahmoud. Hi.
Good afternoon, Shivani.
What can you tell us about the situation on the ground in Gaza now? We've seen huge bombardment overnight. What else can you tell us?
The situation is really dire and grim at the moment. So the bombardments have been horrific overnight, but right now they're even worse. The frequency of the bombardments is increasing minute by minute, and the severity also of the bombs are increasing minute by minute as we are speaking. In general, it's really a grim reality that we are living in right now because there are many fatalities and many people are injured, and the health system is actually struggling to cope with the huge influx of the injuries that are facing it.
Again, worth saying that in a bombardment such as the one that's been going on, there are little to no air raid shelters in Gaza, are there? It's a small area packed with people and not many places to hide.
Yes, so I have been listening, to your callers from Israel saying that they had to stop in 2 shelters on the way. This is unfortunately something that we don't have in Gaza. There are no designated shelters for Palestinians aside from UNRWA schools, United Nations schools. Right now, UNRWA have indicated that there are 123,000...
Can I ask whose fault do you think that is? Because Gaza has its government, doesn't it?
It does, of course.
Couldn't they create a social infrastructure?
I am here to discuss humanitarian things.
Okay,
but
I understand.
But speaking generally, you have stated that Gaza has been under a blockade for 16 years and more now.
It has.
And this blockade has actually depriving people from, building proper infrastructure, rebuilding their houses. So some of the houses that have been destroyed since 2014 and 2008, the escalations back then, they have not been rebuilt until this moment. So this gives you a glimpse of how the situation is really bad. Infrastructures, majority of the streets that were destroyed, for example, in 2021, haven't been rebuilt properly with proper infrastructure. We cope and struggle, with bad roads every day as a result of what has been ongoing in the previous escalations. So as I said, 123,000 people right now are internally displaced in 64 United Nations schools. 45 of them have been prepared, to receive internally displaced people, but the others are not. And this morning, one of those UN schools were hit actually by a bombardment. So even those shelters aren't safe for people to go.
So when Netanyahu says, "I urge Palestinian Gazan citizens to leave," you say what? Leave and go where? All they've got is a UN school to go to. Would that be your reply to him? That's literally physically what's on the ground.
Of course, as a Palestinian, that's what we are living with. So many of my colleagues have been receiving messages who are living near the west of Gaza, near the coast. They have been told to evacuate to the south of Gaza toward the shelters. There are no shelters there. Where are they going to go? Even empty streets, this is not going to be safe for anyone in Gaza right now.
What do you think would make life quickly better for Palestinians? And I understand that you come at this with a humanitarian hat on. I understand that, so please only answer as far as you want to. But I ask the question because Hamas is very specific about what it thinks and feels about Israel. Now, some people in Gaza will agree with them. I assume some people don't. What would quickly improve life for Gazans?
Right now, ending all hostilities on both sides and allowing, medicines, drugs, medical disposables, and everything to enter Gaza for the recovery phase. I'm saying this because even without escalations, with the ongoing blockade, the most recent statistics from health facilities in Gaza have indicated that 48% of the medicines needed to save lives and 29% of the medical.
terribly wrong. I can't say, and someone will have to answer it.
You think they would dismantle the fence protections?
It could be. There is a suggestion, obviously not proven or anything, but there is a suggestion that Iran had something to do with cyber control, something. Who knows? I don't know. This is something that we will find out in the future. But something went terribly, terribly wrong.
I really hope you get news of your nephews, and thank you, Diana, for calling.
Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. David is called from Blythe in Northumberland. Hello, David.
Hello, Sheila. I want to start off by saying, of course, Hamas is an abhorrent organisation. It is an abhorrent organisation, and its ideology is wrong. There are also two other groups that are fighting from the West Bank. There's the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine and the Democratic Front for the DFPL, I believe they're called, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, and they both are secular parties. They are anti-Zionist, however, they are Palestinian organisations that at one point the PFLP was quite well popular in Bethlehem, in the West Bank. It's always been a communist party or socialist, however you wish to argue it. These groups are also fighting. Now, the violence is abhorrent. However, this violence is not new in the area, No,
but it's a specific type of violence, what we saw over the weekend, isn't it? Apart from the rocket charges, which you see quite a lot. Getting onto the ground and then behaving the way they did, in the way that we've seen before on Mount Sinjar against the Yazidis and various other places, in Paris, on the streets of Paris, in the Bataclan, in various places where people have, Westminster, Sir David Amos's constituency, where you just see jihadism, Islamist terror. That's what that was.
We see a lot of the violence that has taken place was the same that was done against Palestinians 75 years ago. You had the Deir Yassin massacre, where the urban...
Yeah, but David, we can't resolve... I'm not denying, and I'm not trying to silence you about that at all, but we can't resolve what's happening now by constantly going back to, but there was that, but there was this, but there was that, but there was this, can we? And I know that's a lot easier for me to say than it is for a Jewish Israeli or a Palestinian. But you see what I'm saying? We have to look at the world as it is now and really make proper equivalence between things.
I understand what you're saying, however, to an extent it still is relevant, because these people who have been victims of this, they've this has informed their worldview.
No, it's relevant. I get that it's relevant, but David, I get that it's relevant, but as adults who want to move forward, you have to make a decision about what you're going to allow to remain relevant in your life. And again, I know I don't live there, so I don't experience it. That's why I said I come at this with as much humility as I can muster.
I understand.
But I was raised by Irish parents.
Yeah.
Their parents were raised by people who remembered the famine.
Yeah.
Those people remembered the stories of oppression by the English, by the British, the crushing of the Irish language, the raping of Irish women by British soldiers, the all of that stuff. At what point do you just keep reminding yourself of that instead of try? You don't. I'm not saying put it to one side. It happened, it's part of your memory, it's part of your history, it's part of your family's memory. But there must come a time where you say, and now we live somehow coexisting.
Of course, and I agree. However, we've still got colonisation of the West Bank ongoing. We've got land being taken from people. You mean
the partial occupation of the West Bank? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, and Bethlehem, for example, a historically Christian town, no longer mostly Christian anymore. Most Bethlehem Christians have said the reason they left was because of the occupation that's been going on.
And illegal settlements. I know, I've been there and seen some of the illegal settlements.
A lot of these things, George Habash, I'll mention, he had founded the PLFP, and he was asked about, why he continued to fight against these things. And he had if I may read his quote, if that's all right.
Yeah, and then I have to leave it because of time.
Yeah,
Go on.
quite quick. He said, "We buried my sister near our house because we could not get to the cemetery. 3 hours later, Jewish fighters stormed the house screaming, 'Get out, get out.' My mother and my sister's children, including a small child we had to carry, ran out, as did other relatives and neighbours. We had no idea where to go, but the Jewish soldiers ordered us to get moving. So we walked. It was a hot day in Ramadan. Some people around us were saying it was the Day of Judgment."
I have to hurry, David. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I will. So he said, "We reached the outskirts of town. We found a Jewish checkpoint where those leaving were being searched. My neighbour's son, Amin Hanan, had no weapons. He concealed money."
David, I'm so sorry. Seriously, for time reasons only. That is not a short quote, by the way. But I hear what you say, and I appreciate that you said at the beginning of your conversation that Hamas is a despicable terrorist organisation. On that, we can agree. And I get that I can't tell people to forget what's happened in their history and in their past. But my hope today is that some element of conversation can move us forward. No, I'm jabbering. I must stop. Thank you very much, David, for your call. It's 2 minutes past 2.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, Rishi Sunak is to chair a Cobra emergency committee meeting this afternoon over the conflict between Israel and Hamas. 1,200 people are dead after initial attacks from within Gaza were met with retaliation. Israel's defense minister has ordered a total blockade of Gaza, meaning no electricity, no food and no fuel. Guardian columnist Jonathan Friedland told LBC it's difficult for Israel to push ahead with retaliatory attacks.
The presence of hostages complicates things for the Israeli military. They cannot go in clumsily because the very people they would want to target, Hamas military positions, would be exactly where they suspect or fear women, children, elderly. Hostages are being kept, so their hands are really tied.
The Foreign and Commonwealth Office is advising against all but essential travel to the region. A range of airlines have made changes to their flight schedules. Rachel Reeves says she does not underestimate the problems Labour might face if they win the next election. The Shadow Chancellor told the party's conference she's ready to rebuild Britain, but will be disciplined with public money. She told the audience she wants to get the UK economy back on track after the Conservatives caused mayhem.
Under Keir's leadership, that opportunity is finally within our grasp, but only if we allow no complacency. Only if we fight for every single vote. Only if we work every day to show that we are the party with the discipline, with the determination, and with the vision to rebuild Britain.
7 people affected by the Stonehaven rail crash have secured almost £1 million in damages from Network Rail. 3 people died when a ScotRail service hit a landslip in August 2020. The money will be shared between 2 people who lost family members and 5 passengers. An application to hold Gary Glitter's parole hearing in public has been rejected. The 79-year-old is due to be considered for release from prison in January. Glitter, whose real name is Paul Gadd, was jailed in 2015 for abusing 3 schoolgirls between 1975 and 1980. In the city a short time ago, the FTSE 100 was trading up 7 points at 75.01. The pound buys $1.21 and €1.15. LBC weather, warm and sunny for most of the UK. Patchy rain for Northern Ireland, Northern England and the south of Scotland. A high of 24 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Lottie Morley.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Sheila Fogarty.
Hello there, good afternoon to you. I am just looking at the latest developments in Israel and Gaza. Israel's defense minister has ordered a complete siege, this happened a couple of hours ago, ordered a complete siege of the Gaza Strip involving the cutting off of food, fuel, electricity and water supplies. This is just 2 days after those shock events in Israel by Hamas, which left hundreds of civilians dead. Horrendous terrorism by Hamas. 9 US citizens are now confirmed dead. More than 10 British citizens are feared dead or missing. It's a global community, really, in Israel, without a doubt. And the chief rabbi today was saying there probably isn't a Jewish family in the UK that hasn't been affected by this in one way or another, not least with very close relatives or friends who live in Israel. Alicia Kearns joins me, chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Conservative MP for Rutland and Melton. This is, and it's coming through from callers that a deeply complex and concerning situation. COBRA meeting this afternoon, led by the Prime Minister. What do you think the most urgent thing from an outsider's perspective is? It's a difficult question, isn't it? So much.
So look, there are still so many Israelis being held hostage, of which so many are women, although I have just seen on Twitter, although I haven't been able to fully verify it, that it does look that, for example, one elderly lady has been able to be rescued by Israeli Defence Forces. That gives us some sign of hope that they will be able to be rescued. But I am worried about the siege of Gaza, as they're calling it. There are 2.2 million people within the Gaza Strip. Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people, and it most certainly doesn't represent Palestinian civilians and the children within the Gaza Strip. I have been saying over the last few days, I understand the pain of our friends in Israel. We mourn with them, and the scenes we have seen are so egregious and evil. But it is really important that Israel prioritises targeting Hamas military sites and not the Palestinian women and children and civilians who cannot get out of Gaza. We want to make sure we minimise how many civilian lives are lost.
And Hamas are making it clear, who knows the truth of what they're saying, but they're making it clear that those Israelis that they have kidnapped, abducted, they are placing in different parts of Gaza so that they can be used as leverage and potential protection for them. Hamas has a history of using not just its own civilian population for cover, but now Israelis.
Absolutely. Look, we should... there is a real willingness of some to conflate Palestine, Palestinians and Hamas. Hamas's attack on Israel does not serve the people of Palestine. It does not help them secure the two-state solution that is needed. It does not reduce the conflict between Israel and Palestine. All it has done is essentially make the situation far, far worse. It has murdered senselessly and completely unnecessarily too many Israelis. And now, essentially, we know that Hamas is solely working in the interest of itself. Because if it really wanted to help the people of Palestine, the so-called reclaiming of statehood, which they say is their primary objective, they would not have carried out these massacres that they have done. It's really important we draw this distinction between Hamas and Palestine.
How concerned are you about this group Islamic Jihad, who on the ground are very close to Hamas? I was reading reports about them on Al Jazeera's website this morning. Based on that report, they appear to have the whip hand over just how hard to go in against Israel, including civilians.
So there are a number of Islamist groups that appear to be rallying to the cause, and obviously Islamic Jihad, as you said, took part fully. They are a spin-off of the Muslim Brotherhood. Again, these are terrorists who are solely interested in their own objectives. And as I've said over the last few days, the only objective that I can see from this mindless brutality is the interest of Iran, is making sure that Israel and Saudi Arabia do not come to normalization process that would have seen them turn their eye towards Iran. Iran is an international sponsor of state terrorism. It is what they do in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, you name it. Should be really concerned. This isn't over yet. Many of us are talking about the West Bank as well. Are there groups within the West Bank or who plan to infiltrate the West Bank and try to open another front within Israel? This is a really difficult time. Hezbollah has started firing rockets across into Israel from Lebanon, but we haven't seen them go further than that. But, these are terrorist groups, they're gangs. The leaders want to save face. Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah so far, has not chosen to go into outright conflict with Israeli forces. But, this is what happens when you have terrorist groups and gangs. They compete. They want to be seen as the leading force. We don't know what's going to happen, and that's why the COBRA meeting is really important. We need to be putting together any and all intelligence we have, sharing it with the Israelis, and having a discussion with our allies about where we see this going next, because it is a really, really complex situation.
Do we know if African Islamists such as Al-Shabaab are joining forces with Hamas? Because I saw in some of the videos I was seeing over the weekend taken by Hamas and Hamas militants and terrorists, I saw faces that looked to me like they were from Somalia, or you don't. I'm not sure exactly what the ethnic mix is in Gaza, but I don't think it's very ethnically mixed in Gaza, is it?
So I'm not aware of any groups having rallied to their cause or travelled to join them, but we have to remember that for the last 20 or so years, well, a lot longer than that, the lack of two-state solution with Israel and Palestine and the treatment of the Palestinian people, and particularly over the last few months as we've seen a more ultra-Orthodox government in Israel saying things such as the fact there are no such thing as Palestinian people, there's no such thing as Palestine, that has always been a rallying cause for groups like Hamas. So it's not a surprise that they would be able to recruit from around the world other fighters from other parts of the world who want to fight for the Palestinians.
And it was Hamas's rallying cry on Saturday, wasn't it, when he put out that?
It was indeed. And I think the likelihood of being able to get in once the operation started would have been quite difficult, but it's possible because given the fact that this was not seen coming, either Hamas was operating outside of its normal kind of command structures, or they had pre-recruited into them, or these people just may have been there for a very long time because of the strength of feeling around the treatment of the Palestinian people.
You have to wonder, don't you, what the last, for the sake of argument, 3 months of political instability that's existed inside Israel, including arguments amongst the military and the political class about how to proceed. You have to wonder whether the Islamists, on their doorstep, looked at that and thought, now is the time.
I think that absolutely could have played into it. 39 weeks of over 100,000 Israelis being on the streets of Tel Aviv week after week protesting against judicial reforms. But also over the last few months, you have seen increased incursions and raids on the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which, as you have seen, Hamas have called this the Al-Aqsa Storm Operation. It is not. It is a terrorist attack. You have also seen an increase in settlements, Netanyahu not apologising for pushing illegal settlements further and further and further. For the last 9 months, 10 months, the situation has looked darker than it ever has, despite Jordan and Egypt doing their best to bring together a form of diplomacy. On both sides, things have seemed to be gotten worse and worse and worse.
I was talking to Jonathan Friedland, the journalist, earlier in the programme, and he said that, in his view, even many moderate Israelis had a kind of attitude, obviously that's been shattered now by events at the weekend, but had an attitude to Gaza, and I wonder whether it mirrors our own, in a way, and by our own I mean the wider world, had an attitude to Gaza that it was, we knew about the blockade, we knew about the immense difficulties that Gazans were living with, and aspects of brutality that they themselves are living with. That we had a sense of out of sight, out of mind, contained. Israel, strong military force, will deal with it and is dealing with it. Hamas, the bad guys. I mean, I know that's a ludicrous thumbnail sketch, but in a sense, there's some truth in there, isn't there?
There is absolute truth in that. So domestically within Israel, you absolutely had Netanyahu focused on the West Bank. That is what he has been focused on. He has had a disproportionately high amount of his Israeli Defense Forces focused around the West Bank. That is a question that he will have to answer the next few answers of why he was so focused on that and helping settlers expand rather than, for example, policing around the Gaza Strip, because it is a blockade.
But the world has allowed settlers to expand as well, hasn't it? Yeah.
100%. So look, when Rishi Sunak appeared in front of the liaison committee a few months ago, I raised with him this. I said, you've just had Bibi Netanyahu here in London, did you raise with him that we should not be allowing the continuation of these illegal settlements? He gave an answer where he said that essentially it had come up in part discussions. I also asked then for the creation of a Middle East peace envoy because I was so worried about what was happening in Israel and Palestine. The world has allowed itself to sit back and say, all our bandwidth is caught up in Ukraine. That is not a realistic proposition to make. There is not only so much bandwidth within the Foreign Office, within all of our State Departments around the world, that we can say we only have one time for one risk or one potential loss of life. Ukraine, China, the Balkans, Israel and Palestine. These are the 4 issues that I have been talking about incessantly for the last year. We do need international re-engagement, and that's starting now. But it comes far too late for so many who've lost their lives, although I would be very clear, responsibility sits with Hamas and Iran alone.
Final question. Are you or how concerned are you? Is it at the top of your concerns maybe that this becomes a regional war?
I think it's impossible for anyone to predict at this point, but that has to be a concern, and it will be a concern for every single internationally focused politician at this time.
Thank you very much, Alicia Cairns, for joining me this afternoon, Chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee and Conservative MP for Rutland and Melton. That COBRA meeting taking place today as well. Anything that comes out of that, I doubt there'll be much, but anything that comes out of it we'll bring to you here at LBC. Back to your calls, and lots of texts coming in as well, so we'll get to those in just a second too. It's 2:16.
This is LBC.
Feeling stressed about late payments? To help, Intuit QuickBooks is awarding 3 small business owners a £3,000 travel voucher to unwind in a holiday destination of their choice. Search QuickBooks to find out more and to learn about online invoicing, because getting paid on time gives peace of mind.
If you've had a cough for 3 weeks or more, don't just ignore it. It could be a warning sign. A cough you just can't shake off could be a sign of cancer. It's probably nothing serious, but finding cancer early makes it more treatable. Your NHS wants to see you. Contact your GP practice. Help us help you.
There is simply nothing else like it. Disney's The Lion King. Experience the award-winning musical seen by 114 million people worldwide, playing at London's Lyceum Theatre. Book now at thelionking.co.uk.
Specsavers have asked me to tell you something important, so I've gone creative and dug out my old Jack-in-the-Box. It's about prices and how they jump up when you least expect them. I said, jump up when you least expect them. At Specsavers, glasses still start from £15. Not now, Jack, including standard single-vision lenses only. He's going to jump up now, isn't he? Oh, well, you're better off with Specsavers. Oh, I knew it. Ask in store for details.
Get ready for that winning feeling with Win Plus. Enter now to win tech, cash and loads more at winplus.co.uk. 18 plus, GB only, T's and C's apply.
The London Bath Company presents our customer reviews on the Which Trusted Traders website.
Customer service, 5 stars. Quality, 5 stars. Value, 5 stars.
That's the way it should be. With 100% of Which reviewers recommending us, choose the London Bath Company.
The London Bath Company.
Your new bathroom, designed and installed the way it should be.
Showrooms in Chiswick, St John's Wood, Blackheath and at thelondonbath.co.uk.
Sheila Fogarty on LBC.
Before I get to your calls, Noga Tonopolsky joins me, a freelance journalist based in Tel Aviv. Good afternoon to you, Noga. I've been following you closely on Twitter, X as it's now known, so thank you for all of those posts. What's happening in Tel Aviv now, in and around Tel Aviv?
I'm actually in Jerusalem.
Oh, apologies.
That's all right. The breaking news I wanted to share with you really from the last few minutes is that parallel to the war that has broken out around Israel's southern border with Gaza, there was an incursion apparently from armed militants, possibly likely Hezbollah, in other words, from a different Islamic militia from Lebanon, in other words, Israel's northern border. And the Israeli Air Force right now is operating in parallel in Gaza against Hamas sites and in Lebanon. That's the news from just the last few minutes. Apparently against Hezbollah targets. And all, the other thing I know is that 2 of the people who tried to, who entered, successfully crossed the border up north were killed by the Israeli army, and this is something that is still underway. It's going to be a developing story.
Do you have any sense of the numbers of people who managed to come into the north of Israel in the way that we know it was thousands or 1,000 or more in the case of Saturday's events?
Yeah, I'm not sure what we really know. There's a lot of numbers being thrown around. I don't know about Lebanon. I know that the Israeli army has acknowledged that 2 were killed. I don't know how many in total, but I'm mentioning this as a follow-up to your previous interviewee who was speaking, I think, outside the Cobra meeting, because everybody is afraid that the surprise attack that was launched on Saturday against Israel by Hamas could quite easily ignite a regional war. And here we're seeing not a regional war, but the first little sparks of at least another Islamist militia saying, hey, we want to be part of it. And what it means for Israelis, apart from everything else, is that right now there's active combat in the south, despite an announcement by the Israeli Army Chief of Staff earlier that it had retaken control over all of the southern communities. There was another incursion by another cell of Hamas terrorists. There are currently shootouts in the southern community of Zikim. Israeli tanks are also engaged there. And at the same time, in the northern border, all of the residents of the western Galilee, this includes the cities of Nahariya and Acre, they're all in a state of siege. Everybody's on lockdown in their bomb shelters. We're talking about half the country easily.
Incredibly nervous times. I first noticed your Twitter feed, Noga, when these huge protests were happening in Israel against the attempts to change the laws around the Constitution and the Supreme Court. The scale of them was huge. What's your assessment of how that political dissent and instability might have been a green light or an open door to some of these Islamist groups while Israel was fighting with itself almost?
Israel has absolutely been at war with itself, and there are numerous aspects to that, including the undeniable fact that the current Israeli government, this extremist, nationalist, religious government led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, has turned the army into one of its enemies. So there have been extremist statements. One of Netanyahu's ministers said Air Force pilots could go to hell. There have been Netanyahu himself, when he received warnings from his intel chiefs over the last few months, publicly said that he felt that these officers had turned to the leftist protest. So among the, immense amount of blame that there will be to blame whenever this is over and whenever there's a National Commission of Inquiry, there's that. But I want to tell you about a very interesting interview this morning with a former chief of Israeli military intelligence, retired General Aharon Ze'evi Farkash. And what he pointed out is that this is an extremist government with annexationist ambitions for the occupied West Bank, the Palestinian territory from which no missiles are being launched, incidentally. And he said that in order to satisfy the hunger, the political hunger of some of his new coalition partners, that this government had sent brigades, entire brigades, away from guarding Israel's borders and into activities that protected even illegal settlements in the West Bank. And that is a pretty, I would say, alarming issue to point out.
Is that a claim or is it definitive that happened? Still claim.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's a very well-informed general, right? But what is absolutely the truth is that this government has sent the army into many, many missions in the West Bank. That's undisputable. Whether they removed soldiers from the southern border, as he says, I haven't checked yet, but it makes sense.
Yes, and I saw as well over the course of many of those big protests, as things got more and more heated, that some army reservists, possibly including pilots, you'll be able to tell me, refused to serve, even just temporarily. Is it possible that some complete sort of black hole almost has been formed in the military that's given Hamas and others this space to do what it did?
Well, you're right, and there have been an enormous amount of reservists who said they would refuse to serve if Netanyahu pursued his plans to basically completely transform the Israeli system of government into an authoritarian state. However, all of them are serving right now. There's been a massive call-up of reserves. 300,000 Israeli reservists have been called up in 48 hours, and they are all serving. People who I interview regularly about these protests, they're all on the border right now in uniform. What this general explained today is not that, there's a hole in the army because reservists used to serve, but simply that the army deployment had been changed in accordance with this government's political priorities. That was how he put it. But clearly, Hamas perceived correctly that Israeli military preparedness was not up to snuff.
And would most Israelis think that any government, not just Netanyahu, that any Israeli government's first political priority was and should be always protection?
Without question. I think, like in any country,
security.
Yeah, I mean, preserving the integrity of security of the borders of your state, it's a basic obligation. I have to say, Netanyahu likes to call himself Mr. Security. He's very, proud of his image as Mr. Security, and this may be the worst security failure in the history of the state of Israel. If it's not the top, it's the second.
Might he go? Might he be forced out because of this?
We have only one thing to compare this to, which is the Yom Kippur War.
73.
Which also, 73, and caught Israel by surprise. The prime minister then was Golda Meir, and she was out within months. She didn't survive the disaster. So I don't think it'll happen tomorrow. I don't think it'll happen next week. But I think that, it's just inconceivable to me, given the magnitude of this disaster. Israelis have never before had 800 civilians killed in a terror attack, ever. Nothing even that comes close to this. There were 260, mostly kids, killed at this rave in the desert. These numbers are very difficult to absorb. I can't really imagine how Netanyahu is not going to bear the brunt of this failure.
Is a government of national unity possible, likely?
What seems likely right now is an emergency government. In other words, not something legally conceived as a national unity government with ministers changing and with, for example, the extremists kicked out, different people brought in. That seems unlikely. But what seems quite likely is a weird construct, a war cabinet, in which a former chief of staff who's an opponent of Netanyahu, Benny Gantz, would join a specific war cabinet that he's demanding would exclude the most extremist ministers in Netanyahu's current government. And he would serve in that role only until the end of the war. He would stabilize the government, but he is demanding for him to serve in this way that Netanyahu forbear any legislation that is not related to the war. So it would put an end to Netanyahu's government takeover plans, and that's a significant sacrifice.
And I think from our conversation, the two really key things to take away are those events in the north, on the border with Lebanon that you talked about, and those claims by that very senior former general about just how Netanyahu has been using the military of late. Such an two incredibly interesting and concerning things. Thank you, Noga, for talking to us today. Noga Tonopolsky, freelance journalist based in Jerusalem. Your calls now. I'm going to carry on taking your calls after 3 as well, so if you haven't got through yet, don't worry. It's very nearly 2:30 even, and we'll get the headlines from Lottie Morley.
The government's preparing for a Cobra meeting after days of violence in Israel and Gaza following attacks by Hamas. At least 700 people have reportedly been killed in Israel and nearly 500 in Gaza since Saturday. Rachel Reeves says Labour would wage a war against fraud, waste and inefficiency if it wins the next election. The Shadow Chancellor addressed the party's conference in Liverpool, saying the Conservatives wasted money during the pandemic. And we're hearing a British Airways plane has had to be evacuated at Heathrow after reports it filled of unknown fumes. Emergency services say 4 people were treated at the scenes after becoming unwell yesterday. BA says the aircraft, which was travelling from Barcelona, landed normally after reports reports of a technical issue. LBC weather, warm and sunny for most of the UK. Patchy rain in Northern Ireland, Northern England and the south of Scotland with highs of 24 degrees.
This is LBC.
Did you know that your morning coffee or shop-bought salad has the power to change lives? To support Global's Make Some Noise, can you forego just one of these small pleasures and donate the money to our charity instead? By paying it forward, you will make a huge difference. Thanks to our payment partner, Barclaycard, you can see online at makesomenoise.com what your donation will mean. Barclaycard, proud payment partner of Global's Make Some Noise.
Amazon Prime Big Deal Days are coming the 10th and 11th of October with 2 days of epic deals on electronics, home, kitchen and more. You'll feel like you've scored big.
We're live as Ian unboxes his epic deal. Oh, he's got the tape off. He's opened the left lat. Now he's tackling the right. Oh, it's a blender! It's a blender! He must truly feel like a big deal.
Amazon Prime Big Deal Days are the 10th and 11th of October, exclusively for Prime members. Join Prime now.
Sky Sports takes you to India for the captivating Cricket World Cup with a special World Cup offer of £14 extra a month. Nothing beats the exhilarating atmosphere and thrilling rivalries. Nothing beats all 48 matches live for £14 extra a month. Cancel anytime. Search Get Sky Sports to see England defend the captivating Cricket World Cup. Ecstasy for England! Offer ends 23rd November. Sky Q required. Further terms apply.
Did you know you can unlock instant savings on your shopping with new BP Me Rewards Price?
Nice.
Give your BP Me Rewards card a scan.
Oh, yeah. Bag myself a bargain. Bag myself a deal. I'm MC. Dad, I'm kicking it real.
Dad, stop.
Booyah!
Celebrate instant savings at your local BP M&S food store with new BP Me Rewards Price. Scan, save, ka-ching. 16 plus participating stores. T's and C's and exclusions apply. See bpmerewards.co.uk/price for details.
Hi, I've got some great news for you. You're the winner of a brand new PS5.
You won an Apple Watch?
We'll transfer that £6,000 to your bank account today.
No way!
At WinPlus, we give away loads of top prizes, like the latest tech, unforgettable experiences, and big cash. Enter now at winplus.co.uk. Great prizes, real winners. 18 plus, GB only, T's and C's apply.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, with Sheila Fogarty.
Labour's Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves gave a big speech in the Labour Party conference in Liverpool earlier on today. It is Keir Starmer's turn tomorrow. We'll bring that to you, obviously. She promised delegates at the party conference that Labour will, in her words, rebuild Britain. She said Labour is ready to serve, ready to lead, and would stick to what she called ironclad fiscal rules if Labour wins the next election. She talked about other things as well, including coming after investigating all of the COVID fraud that took place. Every cheque that was signed, she said, and she took the time to say signed by Rishi Sunak, by the by, would be investigated. Her plans after the speech have been endorsed immediately by the former Bank of England Governor Mark Carney, who says it's time to put her ideas, Labour's ideas, into action. I'm joined by Liz Kendall, Shadow Work and Pension Secretary and Labour MP for Leicester West. Hello to you, Liz Kendall.
Hello, Sheila.
So, the man that George Osborne chased halfway around the world to be Governor of the Bank of England is now saying it's time for Rachel Reeves. Things can surprise you from time to time, can't they?
Well, you know, she's a serious woman. She's a woman on a mission and she's a woman with a plan. And she has a lot of experience on the issues that really matter to the country. And I actually thought it was quite a moment at conference today when we said we're going to take the fight to the Tories on the economy. You can trust us with your hard-earned taxes, but most importantly, that we have a plan for change. Because, you know, one of the things I really feel talking to voters in my constituency, but across marginals in the rest of the country, is people do want change, but they sort of don't believe it will happen. You know, they don't believe politicians. And our job has got to be to offer hope that things can be different, because people won't vote for change unless they believe in that change. And that's really about trust, reassuring people that we know it's their money, not our money, and showing how we will make different decisions, better decisions that will put money in their pockets and give them hope for the future. It is a big ask, Sheila. I mean, we've got to win more seats than has ever been done before by an opposition, and we're under no illusions about the scale of the task ahead.
One of the things she promised to do, because we know that housing, I mean, I've been conscious for easily a year now or more that housing is coming up the rails on the economy generally and health as a massive electoral issue. You know, it's going to be huge, that issue in the general election, I reckon. She talked about that. She talked about planning rules being overhauled, speeding up green energy and 5G projects. Again, insisting that would provide new jobs. But on HS2, which has been the topic of the last, week to 10 days, promising an inquiry into the aborted rail project. It doesn't bring about any infrastructure improvement, does it, the inquiry? For the North.
Oh, I think it would do. I mean, are you saying that there's no lessons to be learned?
No, I'm not.
From a project that's
No, I'm not.
30
I'm talking
billion
about
over and 10 times more expensive than a similar project in France.
No, I'm really
I think
not.
that would be really important.
No, I'm really not saying that. I'm suggesting that while that goes on, and it's absolutely important to find out those things, what else is Labour offering on infrastructure that will A, grow the economy, and B, grow the economy of the north of England in particular?
Well, look, just take a look at the example of batteries for electric cars. We know that if we can move to using electric cars, we will bring the cost down, we'll cost the energy down, we'll create good new jobs of the future. But why is it that across Europe there's 50 electric battery factories? We've got one. France has got 4. Germany's got 9, America's got 24, and China's got 283. Do not tell me that we can't do better than that. If you look at onshore wind, for example, I think there's lots more that we could do there, but it will make a real difference if communities in the area get even lower bills. That's what Rachel's saying is, if there are infrastructure projects of national importance, then local communities have got to feel that they benefit. And I really see this locally on housing issues. When people are worried about big new housing developments, look, they know their kids need affordable homes, but they look at some of these housing developments and think, why are they massive, expensive homes that my kids can't afford? And also, what's that going to mean for getting access to your GP and schools? And so we're saying...
Well, I was going to say, even when...
those rules and make it clear that developers, A, have to stick to legal agreements about how much of that housing is going to be affordable, and B, they cannot wriggle out of their obligations to make sure that the money is there, that they provide for the rest of the infrastructure people need. Because there's a lot of debate about, and I actually see this in, I'm going to be honest with you, my own family about this. There's NIMBYs don't want it built. But what they want is to make sure that local people can afford those homes, and that it's not going to make it even harder for them to...
They want their community to work.
They do. And I think there is a way to make that work if we change the rules and the guidance and make sure the developers stick to them. And that's what Rachel was talking about today.
That house building isn't just about big money for the developer.
No, that's right. And also on the sort of infrastructure. I mean, honestly, if you look at what's happening in America and how they are winning the race on clean energy jobs of the future, more money in people's pockets, helping to bring down bills. It's one of the reasons why their economy is growing much quicker than ours. We shouldn't be lagging behind. We should be more ambitious. And I think that's a really positive message of change from Rachel and Labour today.
I take the point of what you said about housing and shifting the rules there on the battery factories and other green technologies and wanting to be globally a competitor in that mix. We know, don't we, that inward investment and long-term investment is one of the big things that's stymieing growth in this country. Did she say enough to convince us that Labour has not just two, as you've outlined there, but a whole panoply of ideas about attracting that inward investment? And wouldn't something like HS2 have made it a whole lot easier to attract?
Well, look, the mess that has been created, the overspend there, I think we're absolutely right to say, look, we need to look at this if and when we get into government. I think that is the sensible thing to do. If you had a building project in your own,
I get that,
in a house you're buying. Okay, so what do businesses need? First of all, they need to know if they're going to put money in for the long term, that you're not just going to pull the rug from under their feet, as I'm afraid I think we have seen from the Conservatives. Number two, they want to know that they've got the skills. So if employers are thinking, for example, of moving their businesses to my constituency, we have a big new space park, a development there, which is jobs of the future in space and satellites and technology. They want to know that people in the area have got the skills they need to employ. And that's why what we've been talking about earlier this week on excellent colleges is so important. And the third thing they want to know is, if we're going to move our business there and put our investment there, have you got the homes to house the people that we will need to employ?